Sergeant Rosemary.
Good morning, Rosemary Gonzalez, Acapulco Village.
Sarah Hawks, Sportsman Road.
Bob Matthews, Seawall.
Chris Lauer, Bermuda Beach.
Good morning, Peggy Saylor, Spanish Branch Beach.
Boyd Carr, Isla del Sol.
Good morning, John Lightfoot, Playa San Luis.
Kim Van Camp, condos. Anyone else?
Dan Walsh, Spanish Grand Bayside.
There you go, Dan. You're hiding there.
Yeah.
Well, welcome again. This is an unusual format for us. This was really put together by our city council member, District 6, Marie Robb, who is now Mayor Pro Tem. So congratulations. Introduce you also to our mayor, Craig Brown, Dr. Craig Brown, and our city manager, Byron Maxwell. Have we missed anybody?
Yeah, we have
There's
Joe and
Joe Giusti,
Mays
Middleton, Marissa Jackson,
President Scotty. Our police officer.
Pardon?
Police officer.
Oh, Sean Miguel, yes, Sean. Good to see you over there.
And me.
Jamaica Beach.
How much
Taz from Jamaica Beach City Council member. Welcome, Taz. She's our official photographer.
All right.
Any others have we missed? So, welcome again. Nice to have you here. As I said, this one here was primarily called, we usually have our meetings every third Saturday of the month, but Marie felt it was very important, and so did our board member Peggy Saylor, where we are with the after effects of Hurricane Beryl. So,
Pardon me, do you want to introduce the candidate?
what candidate?
Mark Salinas for sheriff?
Oh, there he is, Mark. Yes, Mark Salinas, candidate.
Galveston County Sheriff.
Yeah.
How y'all doing? No problem. Hey, I'm not gonna take any much more of y'all's time than needed. I appreciate your time. Obviously, we have a very big crowd. We have some very big concerns for the west end of Galveston after, the devastating weather we've had. Galveston is always prone to have some bad weather. I was part of it down here during Ike. And yes, I went through Harvey and all the good ones. And even when I was a baby, I was born and raised here on the island, I went through Alicia. So I understand everyone's concerns when it comes to infrastructure and power and safety. And what I'm telling you right now, I'm running to be your next sheriff of Galveston County. What I have for you is this. I am a 24-and-a-half-year veteran in law enforcement. I have worked here in Galveston County all my life. The last 7 years I've worked in Harris County. I used to work for the sheriff's office for almost 17 years.
I hate to cut you off, but we have a
Oh,
long
I'm sorry.
meeting. So this is really
Hey, we're
just
not
an introduction.
Okay, I know that.
oriented
But hey,
yet, so.
I appreciate your time, and I didn't mean to take it that long, but if y'all have any concerns, please reach out to my website at votesalinas.com, and you can shoot me an email, and I will answer any questions that you have. I'm pretty much an open book, and transparency is my #1 thing. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. There's a couple of chairs up here, if somebody wants some chairs.
Oh, we're gonna be leaving soon, so we're gonna auction off these seats.
Okay, maybe I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you out here. This is my second meeting today. My first one started at 7:30. And we still are not back in our house yet. But hopefully that'll happen soon. But we're gonna go in a different order than we have on the agenda. And I'd like to introduce our Senator Mays Middleton, who I can't tell you, I have him on my hotline and I use it often, and he helps me get things done. And Mays, please.
Oh, thank you, Marie. Can y'all hear me okay? Marie and I and the mayor were talking all the time in this disaster, which really shouldn't have been as nearly as bad as that disaster ended up being. But first thing first, Tuesday, TWIA, right? So they're trying to propose a 10% rate increase. So first things first, please make your voice heard to oppose that. What a lot of people don't realize is they have an ABC adjuster. So that's the replacement cost adjuster. And that's gonna be 13% this year, right? And you don't always know you can opt out of that, right? A lot of people don't know that. I hear that a lot where they say, hey, the rate didn't go up, but I'm writing a bigger check, to TWIA this year. It's because of that. That's the replacement cost adjuster. So when you add those together, if you did not opt out, that's 13% plus the 10% proposed rate increase. So that is over 20% your windstorm rates could go up. That is unacceptable. It's wrong. And I'm going to be there to oppose that. And unfortunately, I had a bill that I passed in the Senate that would have stopped this rate increase. It was SB 1217. Nearly all of that 10% rate increase proposal is because of reinsurance. And they're basically overbuying reinsurance. That's kind of the long and the short of it. They billed us about $1.7 billion for reinsurance costs, never drawn on it. Never drawn on it, unfortunately, since Hurricane Ike, which was a different funding structure than we've got now. So I don't really count that for that. But anyway, please make your voice heard. That's the TWIA meeting on the 6th. It's at the Tremont House. If you can't be there, send a comment in. I know the deadline was Friday, but they've told me they'll still accept them if you send them in now. It's on the TWIA website. Send an email. But please just make your voice heard because we can't afford this. We can't afford this rate increase. What's going to happen is people aren't going to be covered, right? It's more than our property taxes for a lot of people in here. I know. For most of us, actually. So now on to the topic of the morning, CenterPoint. So we had a 12-hour hearing, almost 12-hour hearing this past week. We had their CEO there, who's from California. So it's your first sign of an issue there. But the amount of ways that they failed, I discovered was more than I even realized. Number one, if you're a transmission distribution utility, maybe you should have a functioning outage tracker before a storm. And I asked him, I said, is it a surprise we're in hurricane season? Did they move it? Did we not know this was going to happen? And that system crashed in May. And here's something that is really unbelievable. So on capital expenditures, right? They're a regulated industry. So this is not the grid, by the way. The grid is generation. This is not the retail electric providers, which is reliant, I think, for a lot of y'all, just like it is me. This is the transmission distribution utilities. They're regulated, and they can get a profit of up to 10% that they can get from the Public Utilities Commission, which comes from you, right? You pay for that. We all pay for that. And it turns out the way that they had their outage tracker was hardware, was firmware, server-based. All the other utilities like Texas, New Mexico, they had it cloud-based. Well, there's a difference. Cloud-based, they don't get a profit on that. Server-based, they do. So I believe they actually had an outage tracker they knew was likely to break so they could profit more off of us. And then I asked their CEO, did you bother to call the Public Utilities Commission before the storm hit? No, he did not. Nor did he call the acting governor, nor did he call anyone else, or TDEM, Texas Department of Emergency Management. So now we get into the response itself. And you all saw this, we all saw the pictures, the lineman trucks, and the linemen are heroes, right? That's not their fault that they were sitting there in those parking lots. That's a leadership problem at CenterPoint. It's not a lineman problem. They're the ones risking their lives to get our power back online. But they had field ticket congestion, so that's basically the work orders. And I asked the CEO about that. He said, well, we could do better. Oh, okay. And then other issue is remote onboarding. So like Texas, New Mexico, for example, and some of the other transmission distribution utilities were much more efficient at that. CenterPoint did not have a remote onboarding of these linemen. This mutual assistance, they're coming in from out of state, right? And that's basically the training they need to get going, get deployed. So they screwed that up too, as well. And then you think about some of the other things as well that happened. We had a program called the Mobile Gen program. And what that is it allowed these transmission distribution utilities to own generation. And obviously the intent of that was for situations like this. Well, we find out in the hearing that 80% of those weren't even working because they were too large. They were designed for like a kind of a peaker plant thing, which is when we're short on power supply, not when the transmission lines are down or damaged. They're really large units. One of them was up in Algoa, never turned on, couldn't turn on. None of these units turned on, none of them did. The smaller ones did, but that was very limited. We had one on the nursing home on Coveview, I think, had one of those. So the usage was very, very minimal. Well, here's another problem with that. That $800 million is a capital expense. So what does that mean? That means you paid about 40 or 50 million in profit for them already for something that didn't work for us. And then, so I asked the CEO, I said, look, your job is to prioritize resources here, right? Let's talk about vegetation management. I know that wasn't as big a deal in the West End, but it was a lot of other places. It was on the East End, it was in Mid-County, North County, Harris County, Brazoria County, all throughout Harris County, up all the way up north, Montgomery County. Well, they spent about 90 million on vegetation management in the last 2 years, okay? Which obviously they need to do a lot more. But compare that number to the 800 million they spent in the last 2 years on backup generation that didn't work. So clearly they were prioritizing resources in the wrong way. And we found out that we have some options here. So the PUC can claw back some of that profit. You've all already seen that they have withdrawn their rate increase request. Y'all see that in the news. So CenterPoint's withdrawn that. That's not going to happen now. But we also need to look at some of these other profit capital expenses that have been pushed onto us. Frankly, that were a misuse of resources and pushing too much onto the ratepayers, where we can claw that back. So we've got some tools to do that and make sure that that happens. You know, and this is another point too. If they can't figure this out, I think they need to be broken up.
Yes.
I think they're too big. Now, I put a little asterisk on that. That should not happen unless we can guarantee a lower cost and reliability for you, right? You don't just do that to just do it. You do it to provide better service at a lower cost. So if they can't figure this out through the reforms that we're going to make in the legislature, then I think they need to be broken up because they are monopoly. We went through that over and over. By the way, did you know they only have 42% of ratepayers' contact numbers? 42%. So the other 58% they had no way to get a hold of and tell you and give you not just that your power's out, but that is because a lot of people are out of town as we do in hurricanes, but the estimated restoration time. And so I asked them, what's really the point of smart meters? You know, if we can't figure out if the power's out, how did they not know that Holland House over here didn't have power? How did they not know that? How did they not know when a nursing home didn't have power? They should be able to tell our Texas Department of Emergency Management, which has the resources and tools to evacuate people in that situation and also maybe get them a backup generator as well. But they don't tell us this. So that's another thing that we've got to change to make sure, you know, that they have all of that contact information. And actually on that one, I asked their CEO very specifically. I said, did you request customers' contact information, cell phone, email, so you could notify them of outages and estimate the restoration time? He said yes. But then we met with NRG, one of the largest retail electric providers in the state, and they said they did not request it before, during, and after the hurricane. So we got a lot of work to do. You know, and we're going to continue to develop these reforms. You know, you got to aim before you shoot, right? So, you know, I'm not going to say that we should go pass a bill tomorrow because we need to figure out the full extent of what we exactly need to fix. First and foremost was stopping that rate increase that was going to be pushed off on you. So that's been stopped. Now we need to look at clawing back some of those charges that you've had to pay for a system that wasn't working like it was supposed to. And that's at the end of the day. They did not get that power restored at the speed and with the volume, the total number of meters that they should have as well. So, I mean, these are the things that we need to make sure we get done next session. And there's a lot of work to do. I'll make sure I didn't miss anything here, but I'll just give you an example here of one of their competitors on Entergy. They sent out a notice to their mutual aid lineman companies 5 days before, said be here, right? Centerpoint didn't do that to that extent, and I know that because I talked to a lineman company in Cypress, Texas after the storm hit, and they had not started work for them yet because Centerpoint had not put them to work yet. So we have a real contrast there, unfortunately, with how Entergy handled that. Texas, New Mexico did a little better. There were some issues there, obviously. Their communication was also much better. That's a whole nother thing, you know. That doesn't fix the timeline. That doesn't fix, you know, the speed of restoration. But tell us. And we didn't know. I didn't know. You didn't know. But then I'm getting updates from Texas, New Mexico that's saying community by community, how many meters, how many are out. Also telling me how much vegetation management crew were in each community. So I could convey that like to the mayor or the county judge or someone in emergency management so we can provide an update, because as far as people know, hey, could come on tonight, right? And unfortunately, I think you had some people die of heat exhaustion because they were expecting that would come on soon. They got themselves in a bad situation. They didn't know that it was gonna be a whole nother week, and unfortunately they died. People died over that. So communication doesn't speed up the restoration, but it can save lives, right? So that's just not a, hey, convenience thing. No, that could actually save lives. So that's a whole nother thing that they're gonna have to do better. And I'm worried. We're still in hurricane season here. We're right in the middle of it. It is not over by any means. So another one could be coming. I hope and I pray that's not the case. But you know, unfortunately, the odds are that is the case. So also been working with our land commissioner as well on the emergency orders for dune restoration, rebuilding. People lost walkovers. And obviously one of my priorities is trying to get geotubes designated non-hardened structures where homeowners associations, property owners associations can protect properties from erosion. You know, I mean, that's a big problem. You saw those dunes are wiped out, and we worked 4 years for those things, right? Wasn't that 4 years ago with Laura, I think, and Omega and Zeta, and all that's just gone. And we're in the middle of hurricane season with basically the flat beach all the way to people's foundations. You know, so this is not a good situation to be in. So I'm gonna continue to work with our general land office, which of course the permit's gotta go through the city if anyone's gonna do that, to make sure that we're able to better protect ourselves as well. So that's my update here. Yeah.
How do you spike the Centerpoint guys to get them jump started? Because traditionally August and September are hurricane season. What do you do to do that?
I think that hearing helped do that, because right before that hearing, they were gonna do the rate increase. They were gonna do that. And then right after the hearing, they said, never mind. Yeah, we're not gonna do that. So.
How about to turn on those big generators?
Well, so that helped. So those are 32 megawatt units. That's the ones I was talking about. And like the thing that was on the nursing home where they're really smaller units, and those don't cost as much. And you know, I hate to read.
And Mace, do you want me to speak on that?
Yeah, the co-view, yeah.
So a 32 megawatt generator, those were brought in after the freeze. The reason for those is because they were supposed to be established when a substation or something along those lines failed. Substation fails, the distribution lines are still up and everything else like that. We're able to get on a majority of homes. Those cannot be used in a damage situation under the same circumstances. They have to find a place to be able to attach to the electric system and be used. In the case of this hurricane, we had to establish more smaller generators, which we did acquire more smaller generators. I was the one who actually installed the generator at Coveview. We got them back on because they let me know, hey, we only have partial service, we can't get back up and going. Stewart 3 is the specific circuit they were on. I said, hey, you got about 15 poles that are down on that circuit, so I'm gonna call distributed generation, go ahead and get them in line with you. They came over the next day, got them set up with a generator. Working with Holland House, I also worked with the mayor to make sure we got their lights back up and going. It turned out to be an internal issue. We got with them, we helped their breakers. Same with the one, Meridiana, I worked with them directly. we got them established after 3 days. So it's not a perfect system. I'm not gonna negate anything that Mays has said. There are things that we need to do to get better. That's the whole quote unquote that I've heard is do better. But I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I was here with the linemen, 6 a.m., day of the storm. Literally left my house at, 4:45 in the morning, came over the causeway, and my car almost went off the causeway. So I know how impactful this storm was. I know how bad it was, and I'll speak to some of the things that we have done and some of the things we are going to do over the next month. But I digress in that. I just wanted to give you all a little idea of how those big generators versus those smaller generators.
Did you introduce yourself just so everybody?
I'm Ryan Dugan, the service area manager for Galveston.
Superstar.
I've heard that the problems are not just Galveston. Houston had a lot of problems with Centerpoint.
Oh, yeah.
Are y'all coordinating with them?
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. You know, it was their whole region. And here's the thing, like on the type of generator, backup generator that they had. How often is our area damaged by windstorm? Are we on the Gulf Coast? I mean, these are questions, really basic stuff that I was talking to them about. And look, we need more backup generation like in Uri. Peaker plants is what we need for that. We're damaged by windstorm a lot more than we have freezes, right? So this is not a surprise. So it was a management problem, a bad management decision to have the type of generation that was for a freeze, but not have enough that was for a windstorm, right? And that's the issue, right? So they asked to change the law to be able to do that. They used not to be able to have these backup generators. They're a Gulf Coast utility. It was the whole region. I mean, I heard from the Montgomery County judge, and he was about ready to throttle them. I mean, it wasn't Marquillo. He wants to leave and go to Entergy, by the way, because they're part Entergy in Montgomery County, so he wants to sever the system and move over to Entergy. But like there was a hospital that was the last one up. I mean, you know, that should be the first up at Kingwood, I think. And even though that's not in his area, they were helping. But that's a management problem, right? Those backup generators need to be small because the transmission system is damaged by windstorm. You can't have peaker plants, essentially. These are miniature peaker plants that work when we have a shortage of generation. We did not have a shortage of generation.
I was listening to the House meeting the other day, and they were saying that they're only allowed to lease the generators, which make no sense.
They can do both. So they can lease or buy, either one. They actually took some generators from like Encore, North Texas, but so the difference is this, like, you know, Central Texas, North Texas, they have very large transmission distribution utility companies, but they don't get wiped out in a common disaster like we do, right? So they need to account for that, and they did not adequately account for that, so we know this.
But they were leasing all their generators.
I think some of them they own. Right?
We have some, a very small fleet
Yeah.
of the smaller generators that we use for cooling centers and hospitals or something to that effect. But in terms of the generators that we went out and started placing around, yes, we did lease a lot of those from cotton and other industries just so that we could get them on board.
Yeah. Okay.
Senator, I don't know how many of you know, but Mays was appointed to the special committee by the governor to oversee the resiliency, recovery, and.
It's a long committee.
Yeah,
man.
whatever. Anyway, their hearing was Monday.
I call it the Beryl Committee.
Am I loud enough now? Excellent. So for those of you who have any concern about us having a voice in Austin, Mays being on that committee and monitoring the questions he asked, which were specific to the problems, the issues we have in our area, in our region, it was exceptional. So as a citizen and one of your constituents, I'd like to thank you for doing that, because you kept the CEO focused on the question. And I think that was really important after, 10 and a half or so hours. So thank you very, very much for representing us so well.
I think they need new leadership.
Real quick on those, Mia, what's the mechanism that you mentioned to opt out of that replacement?
Okay, so here's the thing on that one. Your agent should notify you that. Now, I'm not saying you all want to do that because, so there were two different things like property taxes, right? It's rate times value, right? The replacement cost value with TWIA. But your agent should notify you of that. Now, I've heard, unfortunately, of a lot of situations where people come to me and they say, why is my bill bigger? Oh, well, you could have opted out of the increased coverage, and they didn't know that. And that's a problem. I tried to, that was in my TWIA reform bill last session, to require them to vote on the replacement cost increase because it's an opt-out. With that 13% I talked to y'all about, that's gonna happen without this board meeting next week. That's happening, unless you've opted out. So you've gotta contact your agent, ask them, I don't want this. You may want that increased coverage. I'm not saying, everybody's not gonna want that. They may say, look, the value's gone up, I want more coverage. But if you don't wanna pay for it and you don't believe you need it, you have to opt out. So contact your agent on that. And then on the 10%, we need to make sure we stop that, because that's all driven by reinsurance. You look at their numbers, all their other numbers and costs are down. The only one that's doubled is reinsurance. It is driving all of that 10%. Reinsurance has been the issue for years. It's driven by modeling. Modeling can tell you whatever you want it to tell you, right? So I required in my legislation that we passed in the Senate 2 times, we passed it twice, that they take the lowest model loss to minimize the amount of reinsurance pushed off on us. Because so far that's been $1.8 billion in reinsurance premiums you've had to pay that we have never drawn on, never. So anyway, it's huge issues there with how they calculate that, and I'm gonna continue to pursue that legislation next session.
And just to mention, when you look at the value of your house, they're counting the land. Well, wind typically is not going to damage your land. So you really, let's say it's 100, I'll use 100,000, but your land is 25,000 of that. You don't need to insure your land. So you do want to look closely at that value.
Yeah, and I really have some concerns about how people are getting noticed. I'm wondering about, ask your bank, are they noticing you, your mortgage? Because, you can't have a mortgage without windstorm insurance. That's why this issue is so important. It's literally a basic homeownership issue, right? You can't own a home on the Gulf Coast without windstorm insurance. They require it. So, we're sort of hostage here, and we need to make sure this is actuarially fair. They always say actuarially sound, and yes, we want that, but we also need actuarial fairness for us, and it hadn't been so far. So.
Thank you.
Well, thank y'all. And you know what? I'll leave. If anyone has any follow-up questions or anything, or you need anything at all, whether it's windstorm or this or anything else, I'm gonna leave my cards up at the front. It's got my cell phone. Reach out to me anytime. It's got my email also, and I'll be happy to help you with whatever you need help with. So, thank you for inviting me, Marie, Jerry. Thank you. I appreciate y'all having me this morning. And we're going to continue this fight to make sure, we hold CenterPoint accountable, and that they'll have to do better next time by law. So, thank you.
Mace has been very responsive to the West End.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm gonna say one more thing about Mays, before he leaves. When, they were having the press conference, when the lieutenant governor was down, I think the county judge, a couple of the mayors from the county, Mays was there, Terry Leo Wilson. When it was his turn to talk, he told me he channeled his inner Murray Robb. He used this entire time to talk about sand dunes and fortified sand dunes, so I wanna thank you. You rock.
You do great, Mike.
Thank y'all,
Thank
and
you.
look, I'm here to help, whatever y'all need help with. Not saying we're gonna win every fight, but we're certainly gonna fight it, so, make sure that we have accountability and more sustainability, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the things we're talking about here today are the things we need to live on, work, and have small businesses on the Gulf Coast, and if we can't get the power situation right, the windstorm premiums under control, then people can't live here. You can't start small businesses here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So next, we're gonna have Commissioner Joe Giusti, because he has to pick up his grandson at the airport. And among the many things that he does, just to mention, they control mosquito control. But I did hear the plane flying this morning.
I knew I had this meeting. Thanks, Marie. Just real quick on my grandson that you mentioned, he is flying back from Omaha because he just went through a tornado with his other grandparents in Omaha. He was in the basement. He's got good pictures and video and such, but 15-year-old kid, he had fun. Real quick, I just really want to talk about the cooperation between the county, the city, the light company, Centerpoint. I mean, they were a phone call away, and Mays. It was good cooperation, it really was. I mean, Marie can tell you, we were talking to each other just about every other day probably with different issues that would pop up that affected the West End. A quick example of that is simply, well, Surfside decided they have a lot of damage. So Surfside closed the bridge. I got a call from Marie saying, why is the bridge closed? I said, oh, our bridge isn't closed. So we made some phone calls, found out it was Surfside PD that had their side shut down. So we had folks on the West End that couldn't get home, that were coming from that direction. So we just made a few phone calls, and we worked it, 45 minutes, it was fixed. Because we told them, look, if they've got an ID for Galveston, let them through, because they're not gonna stop and steal all your stuff that's laying on the side of the road, which is what they were worried about, understandably so. So that fixed pretty quick. It's just a matter of communication. There were several other issues that we were back and forth with. Holland House was mentioned earlier about them not having power. And we were out at Jamaica Beach, helping feed some folks out there, and I got a phone call from my wife that said, hey, somebody just called and said, can you do anything about Holland House? I said, no. I'm standing next to Mays, he can. And so, it was that cooperation that boom, 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 it worked out. And turns out the city had already talked to Centerpoint about that, and they were already working on it. Ryan and their crew did, when they found out about issues, they got on them. They really did. It wasn't their level. I actually got a call from Ryan not too long ago about the situation over on the Bayside where somebody was threatening their linemen. And it's like, no, this isn't gonna happen. Not in Galveston County, although it was. People are crazy. He said, hey, who's the commissioner over here? I said, don't worry about it. If you have a problem, call me. And we'll take care of it. I'll come out there myself. I still have a badge. I'll take care of that. But the thing was, I said, I'll just call you SO and we'll have somebody stand by with your guys. Turned out, it worked out. But it's communication. That's what it's about. Somebody mentioned Entergy earlier that's over in Bolivar. They did a pretty good job. But keep this in mind, they did a pretty good job because they've been working really hard over the last couple, 3 years trying to improve their system that used to be total garbage until just recently. And they've been working hard at it. And so they're getting there. It takes time. Situations like that. So communication. Now, I'm not going to talk much about the storm because you've got enough experts here to do that. Mosquitoes. Heard the plane this morning. I didn't call him. He was already doing that. You have to understand, mosquitoes are absolutely stupid in the entire county. It used to take 11 to 12 days to spray the entire county. Now it's 14. Why is it 14 now? Well, because they keep building subdivisions, and the way they're building them, they're building cul-de-sacs. You can't take a truck and run straight down the street and then take a right and go out the neighborhood. You have to go in all these little circles and make all these circles and then come back out. So now it's 14 days to spray the entire county. From the time you start in Galveston today, it's 14 days before you get back, once you spray the entire county. I did add into this year's budget more money for more material, more spray, and also for more personnel. One more is
Can
better
you
than that.
explain, because I get this question from all over the city, how the truck works?
Sure.
Because people say, it drove through my neighborhood at 50 miles an hour. Can
Which
you
they're not going 50, but it just looks like that. But think about this, how fast does that plane go when it goes over you? Like 200? Guess what? That truck can go pretty quick too, because it's all computerized. It knows how much product to squirt out. It knows the direction of the wind. It knows the temperature. It knows the humidity. It knows everything in that computer. And it controls how much product it's putting out as it goes based on speed and wind and all those different factors. Same as the airplane does. It's all computerized. You'll see the airplane flying out over the Gulf thinking, where the heck's he going? Well, he's spraying. It may drift a mile, a half a mile, to get where it's going based on his altitude and everything else. Now keep in mind too, you cannot spray during the day unless you're not really supposed to spray during the day. Why? Because it kills beneficial insects, that's why. So at night, early morning, you're just getting mosquitoes pretty much. If you spray during the day, you're getting honeybees, you're getting butterflies, you're getting everything else that we do not want to affect. Something we started this past year, really within the last couple of years, is we're doing spraying the ditches, just throwing larvicide in the ditches. You'll see a truck during the day out spraying. It's not spraying the poison, it's throwing larvicide in the ditches. What the larvicide does is it keeps the mosquitoes from ever developing. They come out deformed basically. It doesn't harm any other bug, it just goes after the mosquitoes. Now, good and bad. It lasts about 90 days. It's kind of expensive. That's okay if it works. But when it rains as much as it has rained, it washes it away. And so, because it, like I said, it'll last 90 days unless it gets washed away. But with that said, they have surveillance teams that go out every day. And a surveillance team, you would think that sounds pretty official. No, they step out of their truck and hold their arms out. If enough bugs and mosquitoes land on them, yep, we got a problem here. It's not real sophisticated. But they also have traps that they collect mosquitoes and they test for disease all the time for different areas throughout the county. They will test for diseases, and if a mosquito shows up that has a disease, boom, they'll concentrate that area. So that will screw up the schedule as far as we started here, but now we have to concentrate over here to get these diseased mosquitoes, because we do not want an outbreak of something bad. So anyway, that's basically how that works. It takes time to spray the whole county. And you know, the worst I've ever been attacked by mosquitoes, believe it or not, wasn't the West End. It was Bolivar. And which is kind of the West End. It's pretty much the same thing, really, if you think about it. But it is what it is. We do what we can do. It's up to you, though, to keep your backyards and your front yards clear of any kind of standing water, because that's a huge problem that we do have. Because even when we spray, if it's in your backyard, kind of hiding between high fences and stuff, that spray doesn't always get there. So, questions? Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, it's been a great meeting, and thank you, Marie. Lots of good talk, but I'm here for mosquitoes. I live in Bay Harbor.
Yes, sir.
About a mile west of Sea Isle.
Right.
We don't get sprayed every 14 days. Someone's getting it maybe 14 days, but we're not. What can be done as far as budgeting, so we're not in an emergency situation and having to call and get upset all the time?
Gotcha.
Hiring more people, getting more equipment, budgeting for it.
Well, I'm working on that too. Like I said, I've already got it in this year's budget to do more. Now, with that said, think about this too. After Beryl, we had 1 or 2 days when the sun was out. It rained for almost 2 weeks after that. We can't spray in the rain either. Rain and wind drastically affect whether we can spray or not. And so those 2 weeks almost, we couldn't spray. That's, you know, what are you gonna do? We just could not spray because of the rain. The chemical is totally ineffective. And every time that plane comes through, that's $10,000 you're dropping. Not saying that, you know, that's too much, but it adds up. It adds up. What I'm saying is we just can't waste it, because if it's raining, we're not gonna drop it. If the wind's too high, the plane can't fly. And if the wind's too high, the trucks can't even spray, because it really screws up where it's gonna go. So that's a huge issue. It's a problem.
It's not just a this year problem though, it was the same last year.
It's an all the time problem. It is, but it's an all the time issue. That's why I wanted to start going more to the larva side, because if we can keep them from hatching or hatching with defects, then we can get there. And we've done more, we've increased the amount of larvicide this year. And there again, it rained enough to wash it away. So this has been a crazy year. You'd have asked me 2 years ago, I said, oh man, we're going back in a drought. I kinda wish we were. When it comes to mosquitoes, you know, but that's what it, you know, all you can do is what you can do. Y'all's help will be great, you know, and making sure that you clean up your yards and such.
Have there been any cases of dengue, fever, or any of the viral vectors?
Not in Galveston
Mosquitoes
County.
here?
Not in Galveston County. Well, I know, not in people. There have been some identified cases in some of the mosquitoes that they found. Okay?
You do a good job representing us, Joe. Thank you so much.
Real quick. I do this every meeting just about. If you got something to write on, start writing. 409-771-3888 is my cell phone. Best way to get me, and it's really probably a little bit better than calling mosquito control, but you still have to hammer that 800 number and tell them, because the more people that call, the better. That's another thing too. I mean, numbers.
They're on my speed dial.
Good deal. And you know to hit that number 4 once you get in.
I talk to it.
Once you hit 4, you actually get a person.
Joe, could you repeat your number?
409-771-3888.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marie, thanks again for all the communication and everything else. Thanks, guys.
So, if the mayor and Brian are okay, I'm gonna let our police officer come up and give us an update, Sean, so that he can get back on the streets. He was supposed to be first, and I didn't read the agenda till just now.
I'll go last, it really doesn't matter. We're good, I'm out stretching my legs. Good morning. Good morning. Hope everybody's recovering well through Beryl and everything. I'm here just to kind of give you an update on, I mean, we missed a month, obviously, we were a little busy, or last meeting had to get pushed back. So I just want to let y'all know what our response was for Beryl. So basically, as the storm was coming in, what we did was the night watch that came on that night, we held those guys an extra 4 hours so that we could make the transition period for the swap over for the shifts during a safer window to get our people to work and home. As soon as, and the way it worked that night, once the winds started hitting 50 miles an hour, where it was pretty much sustained, we pull all of our guys off the streets. And then at that point, they're hunkered down at the station, and we respond to calls on a case-by-case basis. For example, if the winds are 57 miles an hour and your neighbor's dog is barking, you're just gonna have to deal with it, because we're not gonna risk somebody getting injured over a poodle that's mad at a possum that's trying to like climb out of the water. I mean, that's nature, it is what it is. If it's something more serious, where there's a life-threatening issue, we will respond to that. The alligator that somehow got loose in the Salvation Army, we went to that, because you can't have people getting eaten by an alligator in the middle of a hurricane. And it was right down the street, so you could walk if you had to. So we just have to base it, and as a watch commander, that responsibility is on you, who you're sending out the door, why you're sending them out the door, and how many you send out the door. Because we also have to keep in mind that if we send our people out there and we can't get back, we've got to figure out a rescue plan to have them in there. So there's a lot that goes into that. Now, as soon as the winds started dying down to enough where they're below 50, our guys were hitting the streets. They're out there helping with damage assessments, responding to calls for high water rescue. funny, most of those calls are because people decided that they could turn a car into a submarine. It does not work as well as it does on the movies. It just, once the water's over your hood, it stops working. And a lot of those high water rescues are us saying, walk toward me, because I don't want to get wet. My 3/4 boots only go 3/4. I'm not going all the way in, So we'll get those guys out, and then we came together, and what we started doing was we put out, and a lot of guys volunteered to do it. Internally we call it the anti-looting detail. It was visibility detail. So what we did was we looked at the island, and wherever there was no power, we pulled in officers off duty, and some of you probably saw them driving around. It's called cruise lights. So you're like one blue light, one red light on, and you're like, why are they going up and down all the streets? Well, we're out there to let everybody know, one, we were there, and two, if you had any intent of upgrading your television set from your neighbor, we wanted to make sure that that wasn't going on. So as neighborhoods came online with power, we'd redistribute those assets further and further west and into the neighborhoods that without power. So it was very successful. I don't think we had any reports of looting at all that I can recall having come through, which is for the amount of power that we had out and for the time that we had it out is phenomenal that we didn't have people trying to upgrade the television set. So that now that power's has come back online, we've scaled back on that detail, but we've also picked back up our West End security detail where we're hitting the beaches since everybody's coming back to party like nothing happened 3 weeks ago. So we're here, we're out there, and we're going through with you. So, anybody have anything?
Did you say that they volunteered to do that?
Well, they got paid, but they did. We didn't have to mandate overtime and bring people in. I mean, there was a very real need, and then a lot of the officers that lived off of the island that didn't have any damage were the first ones to sign up to come in and help, so that guys that were on the island or trying to mitigate power issues at home and everything were able to take care of that. So it was a nice big teamwork exercise, and we were here. Everybody came in for the community, and we got through it pretty well. So, all right, thank y'all.
Thank you, Sean. And next, we'll have the mayor and Brian, if you want to go together.
Let him talk, I'll help him.
There it is, Craig, way to go.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Very good. I'm Craig Brown. If I haven't met you, I'm the mayor here in Galveston, and lived on the West End for 12 years, so I have a soft spot in my heart from West End. Lived kind of Jerry Moan's neighbor there for many, many years. We've talked about Centerpoint. We've talked about mosquitoes. I don't know what else to talk about. No, I'm just got some things I want to run by everybody. Before we get into the city's involvement with Beryl, wanted to mention a couple of things that are going on that's coming to City Council that you might be interested in. Real quickly, short-term rentals. The City Council has started this dialogue. We started the dialogue on looking at short-term rentals, what we can do to make short-term rentals a better community neighbor in some instances, and we started this in May. We will in September come back and start looking at this more specifically. We charge $250 annually for a registration for a short-term rental. We're going to look at that fee, what that fee would cover, and see if that annual registration needs to be changed in any way. We're going to be looking at probably, and council hasn't weighed in on this as yet, we're going to probably move the registration process over to the city. So that would move from the park board over to the city. What that does, it allows the city then to have a closer involvement with short-term rentals. So if we have enforcement issues, we're not following the ordinances and things like that, we have a direct communication with that system. And I think that will help also. We're going to look at having more city marshals, possibly 24/7, to look at any concerns that happen with short-term rentals. So if we have concerns along those lines, we'll have somebody that police, as Officer Migas mentioned, they have a lot of higher priority items than sometimes noise in a short-term rental. So our marshals, if council moves in this direction, we'll have more marshals to do enforcement and so forth. Council member Bob Brown, the new council member on our council right now, he's looking, and one of his focuses is parking concerns associated with short-term rentals. Councilman Brown has been talking with me, he's been talking to staff, and I think he'll be bringing forward here shortly some thoughts on council to look at parking regulations for short-term rentals and how that will work out. And the last thing I want to mention about short-term rentals is that our city attorney, with input from council, has come up with a draft ordinance that we looked at the preliminary draft a couple of months ago, and we'll be looking at that coming up probably in September. If we're going to change the registration process, if council supports this, we'll change it from a registration process to a permitting process. And what that allows us to do, if we have a certain number of valid complaints against short-term rentals, we can revoke their permit. We can revoke their license. Right now, we don't have a good legal way of managing that, so we're going to look at moving in that direction also. This is our first step at looking at short-term rentals. The number of short-term rentals is dropping. And so I'm hearing from the realtors and from the Mount that have signed up over at the park board right now, it's less than there used to be. We're seeing some of these short-term rentals move back to single-family homes and to long-term rentals. And I don't know if that trend's gonna continue, but it looks like it started, and I'm hearing from the realty industry that that may be the case. Moving forward away from short-term rentals, about a week ago, Don Buckingham, the commissioner of the General Land Office, and about 8 to 10 of her individuals that work under Don flew into Skulls Field here. And I, the city manager, Marie, and a number of people met with her on issues concerning the GLO and concerning our beaches here, mainly. That type of situation, we had a good discussion. I'm gonna let Marie guide you on all those issues that we discussed with her on the West End. There's a lot of West End concerns following Beryl here, and also even before Hurricane Beryl, that we talked with her about on how we can get under control. But I'm gonna bring one to your thoughts here that you probably haven't even thought about. As mayor of the city, I look at the concerns not only on the West End, but the East End and at the port and Pelican Island and all over the island here. And what we have going on right now, and I'm gonna put this thought out, I'm not talking for or against on this, but I wanna make you aware of this, especially on the beaches that are right there against the seawall. We have a number of individuals claiming private property of those beaches. And that is increasing constantly, of people coming forward and saying they own that property privately. And also they're coming forward and they're issuing leases to vendors to be on that property. I don't know if it's heading that way or not, but it may be moving to the West End on this. So I just want to let you know that. We've talked with the GLO about that. The GLO is looking at it. They have their group of attorneys looking in this and how they're going to address that. As you probably know, there's a lot of land platted out there in the ocean and on that beach that goes back before even the seawall. And there's ownership things down there now. The Galvez is putting chairs and umbrellas out there in the section of the beach that they own.
And
So we're gonna have to get this sorted out with the GLO. I would say, I told the GLO up front though, and I've talked to city management about this, and I think council is aware of this, is that until the GLO steps in and they solve this problem and they have put input on how that's gonna be managed, the city is pulling off of this. Because we don't have the standing to do anything down there to declare that's public beach or private beach. This is a GLO decision. So we need to monitor that very carefully. We'll keep you updated on how that's moving forward. Let's talk about Hurricane Beryl. You know, it's spelled B-E-R-Y-L. I keep saying Beryl. I want to say Beryl, but they keep saying Beryl. So anyway, but Hurricane Beryl. A couple things that are going on with Hurricane Beryl. First of all, it hit our businesses here on the island at the worst possible time. July, especially around that July 4th weekend, is a big money maker, and these businesses rely upon those 2 weeks. We got hit with the hurricane. We put out a notice about 5 days later that we were open for business and so forth. And then we had about 8 days of rain. These businesses are hurting on the island. So representing the business community on the island, I would recommend, if you want to go out and eat, if you want to do some shopping, head over to these stores down on the Strand and throughout the island. They would appreciate your business. This would help them. But we really need to do what we can to support our local businesses. The park board has stepped forward to help with this, and they have allocated over $600,000 for an additional marketing campaign to bring people down to this island, not only in the summertime, but for the rest of this calendar year. And they are putting a lot of attention to that. You're gonna see more fireworks programs will be going on, coming up here. I think this weekend they may even have a fireworks program slated. And you're gonna see a big drone show downtown Galveston on the Labor Day. So you're gonna see a lot of new programs starting up here for bringing tourists back down to the island here. Council met and we spent about an hour and a half evaluating everyone's response concerning basically the city, Centerpoint, and other involved parties, how they reacted to Hurricane Beryl. And so we came up with about 25 to 30 things that council recognized that we need to change, upgrade, and so forth to make our response at the city even better for the citizens that live here. The first thing we talked about was communication. And we've got to make sure that we get communication out to everybody here on a routine basis. We were pushing out communication as we got it. And I want to give a shout out. I'm just going to step aside for a second and give a shout out to the individuals at Centerpoint that were boots on the ground working on this. And Ryan, thank those individuals. They did a fantastic job and they worked very, very diligently to get this power back on.
Yep.
But moving away from that, we've got a lot of other things. The communication, we are going to put out routine times of communication to our citizens. We got it out in all forms of media, but an area that we were lacking on is getting it out via text or emails. So we are looking at our system here in Galveston, so you can sign up. We'll have some more information on that coming up shortly. You can go there, sign, I want to be contacted by text or email, and you will get the information flowing into you. We're not going to overpower you. We're not going to give you so much information that you'll quit looking at it. But what we are going to do is we're going to give those emergency updates to you so that you know what we know as soon as we know it. And that's going to be very important. I want to talk very quickly about the trees and so forth. May's mentioned about the vegetation and controlling that for the lines, but 60% of the vegetation that caused problems and knocking power out was on private property. So if you have trees, if you have palm trees, and this applies mainly to our east end, we really request that our citizens go in there and keep these trees trimmed and away from these power lines. That's going to be so important. We are going to put out a message coming up here shortly. The city, with any of these approaching storms, we're going to put out this message. If you feel that you cannot live without electricity for at least a week, you need to make plans, alternate plans, to either evacuate or have some backup power source. That is going to be constant living on the Gulf Coast here. So you've got to understand these storms approaching. Florida's got Tropical Storm Debbie now zeroing in on them, and they'll probably lose electricity, and sometimes that electricity stays down a little while. So you've got to plan for that, which was heartbreaking for me, and I know for our council members. What was heartbreaking is to hear about so many elderly individuals in their homes, many of them with medical machines and devices that did not have power. And we need to make sure that those individuals are properly cared for, and the way to do that is proactively make plans even before storms arrive, so you can move off if you don't plan on not having electricity on many of these storms. You need, if you're an individual that wants assistance on evacuation, you can register with the state at the STEER system. And Jerry, I'll send you all that information so you can send that out. And also, when we get our system going, where you can register for just either text or emails, you'll be notified of that. And please register so that we can get that out to you if the TVs and the radios and all of that are not working properly. One last comment I'll make. In our system here in Galveston, be it good or bad, when we have these storms approach, I as mayor sign a disaster declaration for the island. And I do that prior to the oncoming of the storm. And we do that because that sets us up then for state and federal aid. But when we do that, that shifts the involvement and the control of the city to the mayor. And so that comes on my shoulders when we do that. And so I'm the one that calls for evacuations or not. If you were here for Hurricane Laura, we had a mandatory evacuation. When I call, if I do, for a mandatory evacuation, we cannot force you to evacuate. You can stay here. But you have to realize that you're not going to get city assistance, because this storm will be to a point, if we call for a mandatory evacuation, that we don't want to put our first responders in harm's way. So remember that. I usually, as we did for Hurricane Beryl, I called for a voluntary evacuation of the West End. I did that for two reasons. Because the West End is more vulnerable because of you don't have the seawall there, but also it's 4th of July weekend. We had a ton of short-term rental and visitors on this island on the West End, and they don't realize what happens when storms hit. And we wanted to give them a heads up and give them the opportunity to move off the island and get out of harm's way. So we'll be monitoring that. Sometimes they call me the disaster mayor. I was the mayor involved with Laura. I was the mayor involved with the winter storm, Uri. I was the mayor here in Beryl. I was the mayor in all these alpha beta storms that came on board here. So it seems like I hope that I'm not attracting storms. But it's one of those things that if you live on the Gulf Coast, That's just the way it is. Follow the National Weather Service. That's what we officially at the city follow. We have 2 backup private weather services at the city that advises us, and we use them for consultative type input during these approach of the storms. But when it comes to making calls and formal calls, it's the National Weather Service. So I'd really advise you, that's the service that you need to really watch closely on their projections and things like that. And one last thing, if you would, and we're gonna, as I mentioned, get this out regularly and routinely to you, but follow the city's announcements on what's happening with these storms and afterwards. There was a lot of input coming from different sources that were giving you information that was incorrect. And so we really need to make sure that we provide the opportunity of getting that message out to all of you so that you will know what the stance is of the city, which is the policies and so forth that we will be following as we move forward before and after these storms. I want to tell you it's been a pleasure serving your mayor. This is my last term. I'm term limited. I will expire in May of 26.
Your term.
So you can kind of have a sigh of relief after that, and you know we won't have a lot of storms coming on. Any questions?
I was also very happy to see that the RVers were getting out quickly.
Yes, sir.
Right before the storm. I don't know exactly how that happened, but I noticed they were pulling out.
Well, the RVers we notified as many people as we could. I personally notified all the short-term rental organizations to let them know, to let their tenants know that they need to get out of harm's way and move on. So it's very important we keep that communication.
For us out here, it's very important.
Yes, sir. By
I
all
want to get
means.
in line.
By all
A couple
means.
of questions in the back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for showing up and explaining things as you have. Could you explain what the criteria would have been to change from a voluntary evacuation to a mandatory evacuation? What else would have had to happen?
It's hard to answer that question, and let me see what I can hopefully be as transparent as possible. Because there's so many different circumstances that prompt that decision. But I would say if we see a storm that's coming here, and I'm gonna use this kind of as a general rule, if it's a Cat 2 or above, and we're gonna be on the dirty side or get a direct hit, you'll probably see a mandatory evacuation being called. And that also is for the individuals, the elderly and the disabled, that don't have ability to get off the island if evacuation is called. If I call a mandatory evacuation, it triggers the Texas Department of Emergency Management to provide buses, to bring buses in. We brought in for Laura about 40-something giant buses and move those people off the island. And it triggers also the state to line up the hotels in Austin where they go to, the food for them, and all the transportation back when it comes back to us. So if a hurricane's approaching, and I feel, and let me say this, it's not only me. I don't have the expertise on many of these decisions as our staff does. I have a leadership group. It's the city manager, deputy city manager, police chief, fire chief, and director of emergency management. So any of these decisions, I go to them and and see what their thoughts are. They give me input, and then the decisions are made. If it's a Cat 2 or above, and we feel that it's gonna really involve the infrastructure of the island, then we'll call for a mandatory evacuation.
And a lot of our private services that we subscribe to now give us slosh models and surge models so we can see inundation and things like that. So don't get buried in categories of storms, because as we've learned from Ike and we've learned from Beryl, the categories, they don't mean a whole lot anymore. You can get a really nasty Category 1 that we just had, or you could have a Category 5 surge with a Category 2 hurricane. So we look at all these variables. A big cutoff for staff when we're recommending to the mayor is inundation of evacuation routes, duration of inundation, and tipping speeds for the winds. Because in addition to that, there's a timing mechanism that goes with that. And so you need to make sure that we get people out and we're not calling for evacuations too late. But at the end of the day, a mandatory evacuation is really for those that have no other means to get out. If you're a responsible person and you live on a barrier island, you need to have a plan. Because as the mayor pointed out with power outages, a mild category 1 or even a strong tropical storm may be enough for you to make that decision that maybe coastal living this week isn't for me. Maybe I need to be doing something different this week. So you really have to have your own plan and you have to know your thresholds. But I can tell you this, if we call for a mandatory, you gotta go, because it's not gonna be a pretty day. Because we're not gonna do that lightly. Because I've been doing this for 30 years. Evacuations will kill more people than the hurricane will. And we know if we call for a mandatory evacuation that people are gonna die as a result of that evacuation. We know that.
We do, and another thing that now adds quite a twist to calling these mandatory evacuations. The state of Texas has informed UTMB if a mandatory evacuation is called here, they've got to evacuate UTMB. That is a major undertaking. Major undertaking. In our conversations with UTMB, they need at least 4 days' notice to evacuate, because it is a major thing moving individuals from out of that hospital and so forth. And as you know, it is very hard to call what a hurricane's gonna do 4 days in advance.
And then keep in mind, when you start triggering mandatory, it involves your county jail, it involves that hospital, it involves the prison hospital, it involves nursing homes, it involves, I mean, it's a big deal. So you will not see us call a mandatory
And
lightly.
I wanna just say something about the voluntary evacuation, because I called Brian at 4 o'clock that Saturday and requested that we do voluntary evacuation. So they take my input as well. And we do have 2,100 short-term rentals that were full. And people who are on the bay know the water's gonna rise 6 feet and then go back down. If you're a short-term rental person, you don't know that. You're calling the police, you're calling the fire, you're thinking somebody's gonna have to save you by helicopter. So it was so great to see cause you called it around 6 o'clock, and I happened to have 4 short-term rentals right behind me, and by 7, they were gone.
And the way we do these evacuations, our legal department, Beryl hit on Monday morning. My power went out about 3:18 Monday morning. By the way, I was one of the last houses to get power. I'm not sure why, but yeah, Beryl knocked that power out at that time. But you know, we had just a thought on this too. We had a news conference. Marissa Barnett was here. She's our public information officer. She called for a news conference the next day, which was July 9th. And we had a news conference, and going into that news conference, I knew one of the questions that the media was gonna ask is, when is the island gonna be open again for bringing visitors back? And this was when we had that news conference, we had close to 200 poles down. We had debris in the street where you couldn't get by. The Galvez had their roof partially blown off the hotel. They were shut down. We had, and what played a big role in this, and Marie brings this to my attention, is that our West End access points were closed down. And so if I would have said then, tell the people to come on back down, they would have been in your neighborhoods everywhere trying to find parking. So I made the comment to the news media. I said, right now we're in a rebuilding. We need to get things back into order here, and we'll let you know when we will be open. It's probably gonna be a matter of days before we actually get back open. And that's what went out to the media. We put out a notice then Saturday night, Sunday morning, we were back open for business, but there was no way that I was gonna bring visitors back on this island when our residents were suffering and we had debris and we could not show individuals the quality that we really wanna show here in Galveston. Yes, ma'am, and then here and have two in the back.
Yeah, I just had a general, maybe more of a curiosity, in terms of advanced evacuations, when we know we have to leave the island, and for the groups that maybe cannot hop in a car and drive away, and the inundation on the roads, has there ever been any thoughts about using the railroads? Like having carts where we can just load people?
We have talked to
Yeah,
them
we
about
have.
that.
Part of the issue is the rail lines coming into Galveston aren't rated for passenger, which is it can carry 10,000, I guess we eat too much, because they'll carry coal and everything else on it, windmills, but they won't carry people. And the other thing too is really the weak link there is the old Causeway Bridge, and it's not the best probably for evacuation because it does get inundated. It's designed to. So rail hadn't been an option. They won't even let us at this point run our trolleys across it to get them out of here and put them behind the gate. So we have to elevate the trolleys and secure them here because it's not rated for that. And the railroad has more power than God.
Yes, sir.
As we recover from the storm, is there gonna be any focus by the city on cleaning up the drainage ditches? There's still a lot of trash that's got washed in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of it's in the TxDOT right away, but most of it's in the subdivision with all the silt being washed in, so.
To answer your question, yes, that was a topic that we talked about with the GLO. And Brian, do you want to tell them where we are?
Yeah, and right now, you'll see the drainage crews primarily focused west. We were immediately focused we had for 8 days, we had almost 20 inches of rain. So we got a good test of what was clogged and what wasn't clogged, that's for damn sure. But, and of course, we've been kind of tussling with TxDOT over their ditch because it doesn't matter what ditches we clean in your neighborhoods. If the TxDOT ditch isn't flowing, it doesn't really matter. We were outside Bruce and Debbie's subdivision opening it up the other day trying to get it to flow, and as soon as we opened it back up, it clogged right back up again. So we're gonna be out there working. We're working with TxDOT. If TxDOT doesn't come to the table and do their part, we'll do it.
And they are supposed to be here on Monday.
Yes.
Good.
But they were supposed to be here last Monday.
Yeah, pick a Monday, but they'll be
And
here.
Monday.
There's some individuals in the back that's been wanting, let's take the gentleman with the mask on.
Mayor, we've been working on trying to get some natural gas to more of the subdivisions on the west end. And to your point about backup power, what else can the city do to promote that?
Well, what we have with our vital services, our water pumps and our pump stations and all of that, City Hall, we have backup generators
Yeah,
for that.
I think what his question is getting natural gas to the homes.
Yeah, they did not, if you were here in Ike, the gas service went by and turned all the meters off before Ike hit. And then they said, you can't turn your meters back on until the gas service is contacted and they come and turn it back on. As you know, people came on the island and turned their gas back on. So,
This question is more about the fact that they don't even have gas.
Yes,
oh,
correct.
yeah.
Natural gas stops at Jamaica Beach, but also there's a number of subdivisions to the east of that do not have natural gas. But we continue to move forward, and to me, Beryl is the best thing that has ever happened for our efforts, because now we have all these utility hearings. So I know when the windstorm meeting is Tuesday, which means Todd Hunter will be in town, and he and I will be meeting, and I'm gonna ask him to make that part of his agenda on utilities, because that's what makes it 10 times worse for us, is we have so many neighborhoods that are only electric. So that effort continues to move forward.
And let me speak up and say one thing, and this pertains to Centerpoint as well as the natural gas service. Going back, when I started in this work 30 years ago here, the city held franchises with these utilities, and we had sway over these utilities. And that's where I think a lot of the confusion comes from when people are calling the city about their power, because we used to have a franchise with them. And we used to be able to direct these local utilities when it was Houston Lighting and Power, or when it was Southern Union Gas here on the island. And we could tell them where we wanted service, and we would partner with them and work with them through their franchise agreement. A decade ago or so, the state took that right away from cities. And there's a whole myriad of reasons they did that, for better or for worse. They took that control back to the state level, which kind of left the city out of that planning process. So now we're left to work like Councilmember Robb is, working very closely with the utilities and looking for their benevolence to come in and help. From the city's standpoint, we'll certainly work with them on right-of-ways and access and all those things, utility locates, anything we can do. But when basically these people got deregulated and the franchises were removed from the municipalities, these become business decisions. And they have to have enough critical mass in order for them to come in, because they've got their ratepayers and stockholders. They have to show, they can't come in out of the goodness of their heart and spend $5 million to put natural gas in if they're not gonna recoup that money in a reasonable amount of time for their shareholders. It's not, to me, there's a big disconnect at the state level as to whether a public utility is a public utility. But when you have stockholders involved and everybody else, there's a big difference. So I just wanna make sure that's real clear to everybody.
A follow-up question on that?
Yeah.
Surely, by all means, sir.
Yes, putting aside the gas in the west end, we can still, put in the propane tank.
Yes, sir.
So is there anything that the city can do, permitting or whatever, to help facilitate that? Because I'm a good example, I'm gonna put in a backup generator because I live there. Anything that y'all can do to help facilitate?
Oh, yeah, we have an expedited program for generators. We've been doing it now after the freeze in town for a lot. Y'all were a little behind because you didn't have natural gas. And I will tell you, the people that had diesel generators, when I put a generator at my house after the winter storm, because I have an elderly mother-in-law that lives with me, she's welcome to come stay with y'all. We put in a generator, and I really wrestled with, should I go natural gas because of the Ike experience, or should I go diesel? I went natural gas, all my neighbors went with diesel. And I can tell you, after day 3, after Beryl, when I was coming home at midnight and they're out there with diesel cans and trying to round up fuel, I felt like a genius. Now, had it gone the other way, I probably would have had egg on my face. So the propane, you should be able to run off a household propane tank for about 6 days, give or take.
Right, it's just
yeah.
the permitting process
Yeah.
and all that sort of
No,
stuff.
the biggest issue with the generators are elevation, because we don't want generators running and getting submerged. And that's the only reason we're really getting involved in the permitting, because it's an electrical issue. The second thing is we need to make sure the propane tanks are secure, because we don't want your propane tank to be the reason that you lose the downstairs of your house. So those are the biggest issues, but we have an expedited process for that, and we're going through that right now. It's not even really a coastal issue, it's just a building permit issue, and we can usually do it in a day.
And Brian brought it up, but I wanted to recognize his mother-in-law. She said.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a lot of information for us to so let me back up a little bit and let's talk about short-term rentals. If you're moving from a fee arrangement to a permit arrangement, has there been consideration to have the permit stay with the person and not the house? So that when the title is transferred, whoever buys the house has to apply for a new permit. That would allow a moratorium or an easier way for the city to manage the number.
We're looking at that, Marty, and that'll be one of our topics of discussion, yes, sir.
Second, hold on, I have another question. By the way, everybody, don't confuse the beach west of 61st with the beach east of 61st. Those are different legal issues. But I assume Mark Havens was in town last week, and obviously
he didn't come.
Mark Havens is no longer employed with the general land office.
Oh, really? So anyway, Dr. Buckingham was here, I know, because I ran into it. But anyway, as you know, 2 years ago, the park board filed suit to have the general land office declare ownership of the engineered beach west of 61st Street. And the judge, GLO would not declare ownership, and the judge said until the GLO declares ownership, go away. So congratulations to the city, you have to go away from it until such time as the GLO declares ownership. Did you get any indication in your meetings last week on the status of the GLO declaring ownership? I mean, the statute's clear, submerged land belongs to the state, the statute's very clear, but the GLO's been hesitant to issue that. Did you get any indication on their appetite for that last week?
I'm gonna give you the official answer, and then I'm gonna step over and give you my personal feelings on that. Official answer is, the GLO legal team is looking at that and researching it, and will get back with us as soon as they have some details.
And that's 2 years since we filed suit.
My personal feeling is, we've been hearing that for a long time. I'm not sure that's gonna be anytime soon coming back to us. One thing, an interesting twist in this whole thing is that it used to be that if the state went in or public money was used to restore a beach, then that beach would fall under then public land. That whole question now is now up in the air. And the GLO even mentioned that they're researching that right now. It's an interesting concept.
So the Corps clearly doesn't want to improve private land, right? I mean, that's been the Corps forever, but just as a follow-up, you're gonna talk about drainage. Yeah, after the storm, I mean, I'm just wondering about the status of the pump station that.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, the pump station.
And also the wastewater treatment plant out here that we all use.
Yeah, and actually,
Status of construction.
Pirates is, we did and I'm gonna give a shout out to our public works team. Terramar wastewater has historically been a real problem for us because of what we call I&I, which is an inundation problem. We've gone out, we've rebuilt the manholes, we've secured it, we've got Terramar back completely in compliance and we had 0 issues with Terramar during Beryl, which is an amazing issue. We weren't inundated, we weren't overrun. Pirates is being reconstructed, so Pirates is gonna have a new wastewater treatment plant with some extra capacity, which we're planning for the future there. The English Bio Pump Station is going out for bid this week. Bids will open at the end of September, and I would hope that we would be relatively under construction the first of next year on the English Bio Pump Station. The 14th Street Pump Station, and it's not a matter of, they're the same type pumping stations, but one is funded by the state, the other one's being funded by a grant from FEMA. Not casting any dispersions, but let's just say the federal one is a little further behind, even though we started on it sooner because of the funding source. And that one should go out to bid, we're hoping late this year, and it'll follow suit next year. So we're gonna have 2 pump stations under construction. The city and the IDC will be considering the purchase of some land for a second pump station Tuesday on English Bio. And what that does is that drains the center part of town. Those 2 pump stations will basically stop that. Now I wanna be real, this is my line, y'all listen to me, because I'm not gonna be here when these things are probably of real consequence. Pump stations, and you can ask anybody that lives in Tech City, New Orleans, right? Pump stations do not eliminate street flooding. Pump stations expedite drainage, and they reduce duration of flooding events. So, I can hear it already, the first time we get, the first Sunday that we had the big torrential rain, we had 3.5 inches of rain downtown in 20 minutes. That's a 9-inch an hour rain rate. Even the newest subdivisions in League City are designed for a 2-inch an hour rain event. We are designed under the old standard of a 25-year event. 25-year events now happen here about 4 times a year. So we have, every 4 months is 25 years. We age in dog years on the island, under the new act and stuff. Yeah, and these were, in the rains, we had 5 different events in 8 days that exceeded the 100-year threshold for rain events. And I will tell you, because we have statistical data on all this, and we did a storm management plan and everything else. People say the flooding is worse. My argument would be that the flooding itself is not necessarily worse. We're not getting deeper and deeper and deeper, but what we are getting is higher and higher frequencies of these occurring events. And we can sit here and argue about whether we caused it or whether God's causing it or or Joe Biden caused it, or whoever. We're not gonna argue that, but let's just accept the fact that it's happening and we're trying to deal with it. But these pump stations are gonna really expedite that drainage, and the biggest thing is too, I want everybody in Galveston to understand, we drain this island, and you guys actually have it a lot better. I know you may not feel that way, but especially in town, we're draining this island through straws. And you have to understand that the streets in Galveston were designed, they're your first line of retention. There's no lakes of anything in Galveston, like you see on the mainland, these new, in a floodwater in a new community only runs less than a mile usually before it hits some type of retention and detention. It gets held, it builds up, it runs through another pipe to a canal, and it moves out. We're draining this whole island through straws. And a drop of water that falls at 45th and U travels 2.5 to 3 miles in a pipe before it even exits. So the pumps, what they're gonna do, the other thing they're gonna do is they're gonna keep those pipes evacuated, because those pipes right now are full of salt water. They stay full of salt water because of elevation. And that will also give you some retention beneath the street instead of in the street when we have storms. Now, the other battle that we're gonna continue to fight as we continue to deal with tidal issues, especially on the west end, is siltation in your ditches. And anybody that lives on the west end after Beryl knows how much siltation is in those ditches now that we have to go back in. And a lot of you, we had just worked the ditches. We had just gone out there and done all that. So drainage in Galveston is a very expensive proposition, but we're committed and up to it and getting it done. And council has done a terrific job of continuing to invest in the drainage. It's our number one, I would argue it's our number one priority. Now that the police have left, it's our number one priority to get this done. It may be an impossibility, but it's our number one priority.
We just real quickly, we had a stormwater master plan done. We had a stormwater master plan done, and they are predicting we need 7 pump stations. These pump stations, we've got 2 now that are in the pipeline. We're buying land for the 3rd one. These pump stations cost somewhere around 60-70 million each. So you can see the expense that's involved, but we're moving forward.
Yeah, and that takes federal involvement to do that.
Any further questions here? Yes, sir.
I understand that Jamaica Beach has its own regulations and their own city requirements, but back to your evacuation plans. On Sundays, every single Sunday from 9 to 11, that state highway backs up.
Yes, sir.
It's everybody leaving the island that's stayed here overnight. It's the same happens with your evacuation. What can be done to work with the city of Jamaica Beach to notify them that something needs to be done, like turning those lights to a flashing yellow or having police out there on a regular basis? Can we communicate with them?
Well, Jamaica Beach is a city under 50,000, so TxDOT actually controls the signalization in Jamaica Beach. And we'll work with TxDOT on that. TxDOT should have been down there reversing that flow.
And we did, I mean, because as soon as I became aware of that problem, I called Mayor Sharon Bowers, and she was great, and they were able to regulate that light. Same with Joe Giusti getting the toll waived.
And that was one of the points that council brought up. I'll be working directly with Mayor Bowers there in Jamaica Beach, coming up shortly to set up plans and things like that will be addressed.
It's every Sunday.
Yes, I know, I live down there.
Yeah. No, and actually when we did the evacuation, our heaviest time evacuating was at checkout time the next day. I mean, we were backed up all the way up on the freeway.
Mark?
Yes, sir. Mayor, it seems to me UTMB's got all its own backup. On a mandatory evacuation take 4 days, it's a hospital. Can't we have a mandatory evacuation starting on this side of the seawall? Can't you split the island?
You possibly could. We'd have to talk to TDM about that.
Yes, sir.
Because they're the ones that provide all the transportation. My sense is it would probably be all or none. And before UTMB, before this year, UTMB had their own thing going. The head of TDM came down, a gentleman named Nim Kidd came down and told UTMB, you will evacuate if the city calls for evacuation.
And that's gotta make it so hard on you two gentlemen, I just can't imagine.
Mandatory evacuation is not a physical action, it's a legal term.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a semantical legal term at this point. That's why I tell everybody, you need to know your own plan, you need to know when it's time to get out for you. Because when we issue mandatory evacuation, that is to trigger 50 other things.
It
But
does.
but that's where, if I got, like on this one, we came back from the state, we were here, we wrote it out, but we said we're never gonna do a two. If they get close, they might turn into a two.
You know, you're exactly right.
And I will tell you, our decisions are always based on a category above what the best prediction is, which is why we have these other services too, because our private service was calling it before the weather service was.
Well, good luck and thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
We're gonna have you, one more question.
Thank you.
And because I know people wanna hear about the permitting, I
Yeah.
mean, and, saving Ryan Dugan Center Point for last so nobody leaves.
My question is regarding
Yes, ma'am. What, please?
Regarding Karankawa,
Yes, ma'am.
we have a lot of flooding there.
Yes, ma'am.
So how does that fall into y'all's plan, or do we fall into the plan?
No, you do, and we're working on, Trino Pedraza is working on several solutions, we brought some of those to council, so.
They're in the drainage plan.
Yes.
You are one of the projects that is leaking.
Yeah.
How far are we in this?
No,
plan?
actually, y'all are pretty top.
You're in the top of the list.
Yeah, you're top on the west end. Sorry, folks. But, you know, I will tell you that a big fly in the ointment for the entire west end is that for years, most of your older subdivisions were designed to sheet drain to the beach. We can't do that anymore. We have to take you to the TxDOT ditch, which in some cases is higher than your houses. So it's getting to be we're trying to figure out this draining uphill thing, and we're getting better at it. But I will tell you, the other thing is too, is it's kind of frustrating to us in that, you know, TxDOT and the debris in the ditches and everything else, it's a different animal than it used to be. And, so we're trying to work through it, but that's the biggest challenge is we gotta bring all your water to the ditch now. We can't send it to the beach.
Thank you, everyone, very much.
And next, I'm gonna let Hunter. Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor, appreciate it. Thanks, Brian.
Football, that the guy carries on Air Force One.
But I know a lot of people have questions about permitting, what can be done at the beach. So I'm going to Hunter, introduce yourself, and I'm gonna run to the restroom.
Well, howdy y'all. My name is Mr. Cummings. I'm the Deputy Coastal Resource Manager underneath Kyle. I know a lot of you guys have probably talked with Kyle or worked with Kyle. I'm just kind of underneath him. So I came to do an update on the emergency permitting. So those are active, they're online. We have already done a plethora of them already. We're pumping those out pretty fast as soon as we get them. I think the holdup on those is we have to get a specific amount of information before we can just act on it. And it's just making that process smooth and getting those, typically it's photos or something. So the emergency permit goes over stabilization of homes, repair to homes, dune restoration, and walkover restoration or rebuilding. So I have some printouts of the actual permit with me. I also have the quick guides for me. So if you guys have any questions about those, what that kind of looks like. A lot of stabilization right now is a sand clay mixture underneath slab and then going out 10 feet from the habitable structure in just beach quality sand. We have a ton of dune restorations that have already popped up. People are already in full swing rebuilding dunes, protecting their private properties and going about that. So if you guys have any questions about emergency permitting, I'm gonna stick around afterwards and you guys can come talk to me. I'm happy to have cards on me, the permits on me as well. I'll have to answer any questions. I wanted to give you guys an update on Bermuda, Spanish Grant, and Pirates. So what I have for the roads in Spanish Grant and Bermuda is that we are working on getting more limestone. We already have some limestone in our possession. We're working on getting more so that way we can go out and do it all in one
And
shot.
one of the discussions we had with Commissioner Buckingham was possibly coming up with a better solution for Bermuda Beach Drive, because not that I don't love Bermuda Beach, but I'm really getting tired of fixing Bermuda Beach Drive. So
What time are you having to
Thank
fix
you.
it?
And he's not just blowing his horn, that's an inside joke. But we're working with some other solutions there, and You know, while we can't fortify private property on the beach, we can possibly use some coastal money to try to fortify that a little bit better, maybe with some things that the Reinhardts have been very successful with in their subdivision in terms of fortified dunes, and even some fibercrete solutions and things like that for that road to protect that infrastructure, because it's getting pretty expensive, and of course we all pay for that, and everybody needs access to their home. So that was actually high point of the meeting, as far as I'm concerned, with the commissioner that day, was that she's kind of agreed with that.
Yeah, Trino, Robert Winnicky, and Kyle are, those three great minds together have been working insanely hard to figure out a more permanent solution. I think one of the big ones that came out was articulated matting.
Yes.
Was a really good idea, because it's still permeable, but also hard enough for vehicles to drive on, and hopefully we can elevate the road a little bit more.
And I think the key is gonna be some fortification in front of the street too.
Correct.
I think, I'm sorry, part of that are the driveways along Bermuda Beach Drive. A lot of those got completely washed out. And now with the drainage, you know, the backyards are draining toward the road, toward the beach. And it's making that road like impassable. It's almost impossible, you know, to go from end to end. And so we appreciate, and we've been working with Kyle, we appreciate it. Whoever hired him, thank you. We love him.
He's good.
He's awesome. So, you know, we appreciate just the continued support there.
Yes, ma'am, appreciate it.
Thanks.
A while back, at Paps and going into Bermuda Beach, the city rerouted or added sewer lines around the backside across some vacant lots over there. Why didn't the city cut a right-of-way into the backside of that at the time and make a street there?
Yeah, that was probably right after Hurricane Ike that they did that.
Yes, it was.
And I believe, I wasn't at the city at the time, but I've been told that there were some right-of-way issues. It was gonna take an eminent domain process and all that to do it, and we just wanted to get the stuff in the ground. So we did it, and I would tell you, after this long, there's probably a presumptive easement in there, so we kinda did it without doing it, but.
You know where I'm talking about.
I know exactly where you're talking about.
And it just makes sense, because guess what's happening? They're coming into Spanish Grant and driving across some people's front yards to get
Yes.
to that street when that street becomes impassable.
I don't know that our easement would be big enough to put traffic on, that would be the thing, but I'm happy, call me on Monday and let's talk and look at it on the map, see if there's something we can do. I'm happy to look at it.
But one of the things that did come of the Dawn Buckingham meeting is it was interesting when I went to go tour the beach with the Mayor of Jamaica Beach and Taz. They have at their beach access, they use these paver stones. So we brought that topic up with Dawn Buckingham for Bermuda Beach Drive, for Spanish Grant, whatever that road's called. And they are open to us using a more hardened structure that will alleviate some of the problems that are happening.
And some fortification in front of it too.
Right, and fortification in front of it and at the ends of the road, such as in Pirates and even like as we get further out to Kennedy.
Is there a timeline on any of that?
We're gonna address it as soon as possible, and then we have to go through, every time you talk to the GLO and it's not in writing, it sometimes changes. But we are immediately going to be addressing it, because if you remember back when Brandon Hill was here, he had actually proposed something that they are now allowing in other communities, which is sort of similar to what they have in Jamaica Beach, but it's something, it's pieces of concrete or impermeable concrete that are tied together by ropes, and they are having success. They brought that up, and I know our staff is already working on it.
Trust me, nobody wants that permanently fixed more than we do.
I was gonna finish real fast because I have more information on Pirates. So for all of those access points there, we're gonna go systematically from the east to the west over all of Pirates Beach to evaluate those access points for the public. And we're gonna go one by one. Not this week, but the following week, Public Works is gonna go out with us, and we're gonna start fixing those entrances, the ends of the roads. blading those off, figuring out what we can do to enforce those. So we're gonna have like a temporary, like, public beach access closed, and we'll move that as we go road to road to road for each one. When it comes to signage, we have enough signage for, in our reserve to fix all the beach access signs in Pirates East. The sign shop for the city is working on critical signs for the moment for Beryl and all that, but we're told that they're going to transition into coastal signs. So once they have made that transition, we're gonna hopefully get more signs back out, because all of Pirates is missing a lot of signs for.
We have also been able, though, as I drive through neighborhoods, I'll take pictures and send it to Kyle, but a lot of the signs were there, they were just 3 blocks from there. And they weren't bent bad, so we are trying to salvage as many signs as we can to get the process done faster. So if you have one in your yard and we haven't found it yet, tell us.
Now, they're cool to look in your cabana and hang on to your house.
Yeah.
But we like them back.
So Marie, are y'all looking at, like, we're beach access 29 and I haven't seen it, so it's gone. So are y'all going all the way to the pass?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
we're gonna, and we've done a damage assessment of all the access points, we've already done surveys of all the signs that are missing. We're now gonna go systematically try and hammer out the ones that we can with the reserves we have.
Yes.
Sign shop will make more signs and we'll start hammering them out.
And I know there's times when everyone feels like it's just happening so slowly, but if I'm wrong, Brian, tell me. How FEMA works is they have to take a picture of every down sign before they can repair it, or it will not be covered by FEMA.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, no, trust me, my staff tired of hearing me scream about FEMA, because they're slowing me down, they're slowing us down, that's what they're doing.
Thank y'all.
At the end of Pat's is access number 12.
Yep.
After the hurricane, there were barriers put up and there was a sign put up with tape across it that said "Do not enter." The sign for "Do not enter" is still up. Is there a reason for the sign being up? I mean, obviously, no one's paying any attention to it,
Yeah.
which is not a good thing. We want people to abide by the signs and the laws, but there's no logical reason for a "Do not enter" sign into access 12 that I could see.
You're talking about the new one that was placed on the drive-on side?
Yep.
Right
Yes.
before you get into the side?
That's correct.
I think that was put up in regard to, we're evaluating the road. There was parking on Bermuda Drive. And so we wanted to close down the drive-on section there so we could evaluate the road, get that fixed, and then open up that section.
I think the sign, it sounds like the sign got moved, is what it sounds like.
No, the sign as of yesterday was still right in the middle of the access point to go into the access point. Understand the road. No parking would take care of that. But the sign would imply, do not access this access point, do not enter.
Well, I was there.
It's all the time. If the sign saying don't, nothing happening.
The signs are weird.
I was there this weekend. The beach was full of people on it. There just
Right.
weren't any cars on it, which is to our advantage that we can operate around them without having to worry about a bunch
Hunter,
of
would you just
vehicles.
go out there and check out that, please?
Yeah, I can do that.
Make sure it's positioned correctly.
I think the issue is there's no parking on Bermuda Beach Drive at all. But when they have do not enter the beach access parking lot, then they think they can park on Bermuda Beach Drive. And that's what was happening when the beach access was closed. You know, the sheriff and the sheriff wasn't, but the GPD was making people get off of the beach and they were putting them on Bermuda Beach Drive, which is a complete wreck anyway. So it was really hard for, all of us to get up and down the road, especially if we live on a beach front.
It was kind of one of those transition periods where we had all the access points closed down and they were parking on Bermuda. I'll look into why the do not enter is still there. I know that people still have access to it. We did a whole, before Beryl got here, we put up 15 new signs on the north side of the road. There were an existing 20 on the south side.
Right.
South side lost a ton of theirs and we're just trying to work on getting all those replaced up.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I think, if there's a way to limit traffic on Bermuda Beach Drive right now, that'd be great. Just open up the beach parking lot. We're okay with that. We don't have a problem with that. We just don't want people, and also we don't want people messing with the survey signs, the survey, posts that they just put up. So that's another concern, right? We don't want people messing with that.
Hunter, let's look at that on Monday and see if we can't Because for sure we need no parking when you beach drive.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm back to the dunes.
Okay.
And the dune permitting and how much faster that is. Does that mean we can put hay as a base for the dunes?
Yes, ma'am, the hay bale core dune is an authorized material from the GLO.
Excellent.
But you
Because
can only
that's
make
the
that
only
hay
thing that lasts
when the
too
sun
long.
shines.
I'm sorry.
You can only make that hay when the sun shines.
The only thing for the hay bales is the GLO gave us a kind of a recommendation of how they want those hay bales set up. It's something that we work with you when you put in your permit application, whether they're on their sides, the flat sides,
Yeah.
or if they're on their round sides.
Gotcha.
How they're
It's
staked.
how they're staked down, they were really,
Well, they got wiped out, and
Yes.
so we
Yeah.
just want to replace, and it took
Absolutely.
forever to get a permit.
And they work.
To get them.
Yeah,
They did.
originally they were on there, it's like that's the only thing that lasted.
yeah, we're allowed to do it. So
But-
we're pumping out those permits in about a day and a half.
And the other thing that was said by the GLO is they would also look at emergency geotube projects. So I'm gonna have to work with Jerry and see if we can get a beachfront homeowner, meeting so that we can look at how we might be able to do that. And this
I'm
guy
all for that.
has had his hand up for a long
I
time.
recognize
And then
that
over here.
Markwood picks up the little trash that's out on there, but after Alberto, there's a huge log that was right at the end of Sand Crab that during Beryl came up and knocked my fence down. And so I'm concerned now between the big logs that were never picked up and the 20-foot 12 by 12s that are on from the Knowles house. Who's gonna pick those up before the next storm?
In regard to the tree limbs, if they're high enough on private property, coastal zone management, from my knowledge, is not going to go onto private property to pick those up.
These were on the 2 city lots that the city owns in front of my house from previous foreclosures.
It's something that I can take a look at today by Sand Crab. I can talk to coastal zone management and see if they can get some
Check
guys
and
out.
see if they're buyout
I've got
lots, we can go get
pictures.
it.
Yep.
And this was one of the areas that we discussed in the meeting as well. Because the city contracts with the park board to clean debris, but then it's the question of public and private. I know what you're referring to, I've been there, but we do need to get them off because they are a safety hazard. And then I think Bob had a question. Bob?
Okay, real quick, like in Seawall, a while back, we had issues with sand coming in on the access roads and stuff. And the city parks said, oh, that belongs to somebody else. We will not take the sand off the asphalt. That belongs to whatever city department. And why can't we if we ask for the parks to communicate with the other city department to take care of it? The sand's gotta be put back on the beach, which is the parks. But the city doesn't want to take care of the streets to take the sand off because it came from the beach.
Well, the
park
city
people.
does though take the sand and they will place it on the beach.
Okay, but
And it's not the park department, it's the park board.
park board, okay.
Two different,
There's an issue.
But if we
with
just had
typically,
somebody to
we
communicate.
typically just push it right back out.
yeah, typically the city will. Let's talk about that after this.
Okay.
Because what you'll see though, and I know it's confused some people, is in some cases, there's a lot of debris in the sand. So they'll take that to a spot by the airport, they clean out the debris, and then they bring it back to your beach. And they either will, in your case, it's an access point, so they won't mount it, but they do spread it out. And that is done by our public works people.
Okay, and on our signs in our community in Seawall, we've had several stop signs blow down. We drove 2x4s in the ground and strapped them to them. We've even made homemade Charlie Brown stop signs and put up. But we have called it in, but we've had no response.
No, they're getting, we have a complete
Oh,
inventory
okay.
of all the down signs, and the sign shop's working 7 days a week, trying to get caught up. But as Councilmember Robb put it, we have to go through the FEMA process for this. So we're having to document it, and we have to take pictures of the guy who's making the signs, we have to take pictures of his family on vacation, to get this stuff reimbursed. But we have a complete inventory of the down signs, and what we're gonna do is, once we feel like we've triggered, that we've gotten them all, we'll send out a notice in case we missed one to let us know, and we'll get right back out there.
Okay, and if we could lastly, when we started back up with power, it was so hard to get gasoline anywhere. Now, the marina in Sea Isle put a generator over at their pumps and started pumping boat fuel for people to run in the generators. Because we have some help from the city to get 7 Seas or any of the stores that have gasoline on the west end. So people don't have to drive all the way to Buc-ee's from the west end, an hour just to get gasoline. Is there any way after the storm passes that we could get some help to get anything powered up on the west end at all?
Ryan.
Any place?
We don't have any control over who gets power, as is obvious, but.
I'm not in emergency, a generator or something.
Yeah.
Just to help the west end, because we've got people coming in that's, roofs are leaking, they're trying to get tarps over, they're trying to bring contractors in, people are trying just to Band-Aid until we
I know there
can.
was fuel the entire time at 75th and Stewart, because I was fueling there almost every day, and there was fuel every day there, so.
Maybe we need to do a communication better as to what gas stations are open and have gas.
Yeah.
And coffee.
And did you have any other subjects?
I think that's it. If you guys have any questions for me, I'm gonna stick around for a while before I head out to the west. I've got cards on me. If you guys need to contact me or Kyle, I've got some of the permits in my possession. I've also got the quick guides if you guys need that too.
Perfect.
Well, it's been good meeting you, Hunter. Thank you.
And now we're gonna give the floor to Ryan Dugan
All
from
right.
Centerpoint, who I think personally is a rock star.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. I am sure y'all have a ton of questions, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer most of those. Not because I don't want to, it's more so that there are just things that are working in the background and everything else like that. I don't feel personally as if I shared it, it would be the best evidence of what's coming. I can only tell you about what's going on and what has happened already. As stated before, there were about 200 poles that went down on the island. We managed to get those back up within a week. I was here with the crews. We were here as far as the local crews at the Galveston Service Center. Some of the guys stayed overnight. Some of them showed up during the hurricane because, go figure, we didn't have power either. And I didn't have internet, and my cell phone didn't really work, so I was driving in the middle of the hurricane, not realizing I was in the middle of the hurricane. So let's just say these guys really, really did a great job. And it is not the easiest thing whenever you turn around and you have to perform after a storm is hit and you see the impacts that are going on. So what I wanted to clarify a little bit on is what is the beginning process once a hurricane hits? The beginning process once a hurricane hits is it's all hands on deck. 16-hour days until it's done. Until those last meters are coming on, we are 16-hour days. So these guys showed up at 6 a.m. because that's when we told them to be here on Monday morning. I was here. There was not a chance we were going to get out of the service center with a bucket truck to try to battle those winds and try to do anything. About 9 o'clock is the first time when the Galveston Service Center had started to mobilize and started to move people out to start restoring power. Now, what that looks like after a storm is not the same as a regular rainstorm. What that looks like is we put these guys in as many trucks as they can to go out and turn on as many lights as they can. It's called what we call the cut and clear process. The whole point of that is to say, go to a circuit, write it out until you see the first damage. From the first damage back to the substation, let's go ahead, tag the nearest pole top switch, get those lights back on. So those people closest to the substation, that's why you see a majority of them get their lights turned back on. The other focus is going to be our critical infrastructure. So hospitals are the number one thing. That and nursing homes that also have people that are staying there, that are under medical supervision. We've got to get those back on, as well as critical infrastructure for the city. Because if their water stuff is not working and their sewer stuff's not working, well, guess what? It's going to be even worse for y'all at home. So we work to get towards that. My role specifically is over damage assessment. So what we do is we gather all of those circuits and I send out people who are aware of what the circuit looks like, I send them out and say, hey, go look at these circuits, write down all the damage that you see, so we can get a good estimate of how many poles are down, what transformers are out, what lines are down, what all needs to be replaced, so that we can submit that over to the crews, so they know what kind of crews to send out, where to send them out, and everything like that. It is not as easy as a lot of people try to make it out to think. And a lot of times there were pictures that were sent to me of, hey, these trucks are sitting here and stuff like that. It's not always the case. A lot of times it could be, we don't even need those trucks, we just need the guys that came in those trucks. So sometimes you would see a parking lot full of trucks that were just sitting there, and you would see like 10, 15 guys standing around them. Most of the time those were helpers. Those are guys that are just handing off material or something like that. I don't really need them. I need them to watch the trucks, make sure nobody messes with them, but I need the journeymen, I need the apprentices, I need the hot apprentices out there working on the poles and everything else like that. So it's a large process to get things done. Brian, the first day, called me and asked me, hey, just an educated guess. You know we don't know everything. What's an educated guess? I told him people are gonna see lights within the first 72 hours, and there's a very good chance it's gonna be 2 weeks, if not longer, depending on the severity of damage. That is when I started getting pictures from Robb, and I saw all the poles down and everything along 3005. What took those down? I have no idea. Could have been a tornado, could have been a multitude of things, could have been shrapnel, I have no idea. But the point of the matter is, it was down and we needed to get it back up. So that's why we allotted the amount of resources from the people who came in for mutual assistance to the island and to the west end, because 80% of the damage on the island was on the west end. That does not mean that the west end is more important than the east end. That nomenclature came out, and as much as I try to communicate and battle against those things, sometimes you run into a brick wall and people just don't understand the ideas behind it. So when I say I have 500 line skills on the island, I have 500 linemen on the island working. There's maybe 300 on the west end because there's so many poles that need to be installed, and there may be 200 on the east end, and it may be 400, 100, just depends on the severity of the damage, what they can do, what they can't do, everything else like that. I hope that surmises a little bit about storm restoration. Now, to talk about what we have done, we've replaced over 200 poles. The majority of those were replaced with fiberglass. During Hurricane Beryl, all of the poles that came across the causeway were fiberglass poles. They were already intended to be replaced and had already started being replaced, as evidenced by some of the neighborhoods. We started at the beginning of the west end and we're working our way down. Now we just expedited that thanks to Beryl. I also want to talk about Indian Beach and what happened there. We had a bunch of brand new poles that were in the ground. Everything seemed great. They were working for about 5 days, and then next thing you know, they popped out of the ground. That was the first time I had ever seen that. I did not realize that tidal waves and everything else, we needed to put basically what's called a pole foundation into the ground if we wanted those to stay in the ground, just because the amount of water pressure that took those poles pushed them right out of the ground. If you went and looked at those poles, you'd be like, they're not even broken. There was nothing wrong with them. They were absolutely fine. Other than, falling over, the wires down, now you gotta replace the hardware. But in my personal opinion, and the way I expressed it, and our ops manager agreed, we went out there, changed them all out with fiberglass poles the very next day. We had the crews there, we had them lined up, fiberglass poles, went in, did it right. The only thing is we couldn't get those fiberglass poles in the same day because the water itself was just pushing them out. I've never dealt with that. I've been here 17 and a half years. I went through Ike, I went through Harvey, I've gone through all of these storms, and I have never seen anything like that. But then if you talk to guys who go and build the beach houses and everything, they will tell you, yeah, that happens. So it's not to say that our crews did anything wrong. They put it in at the proper height, 6.5 feet into the ground. They surrounded it with the concrete and stone and everything else that we put in the ground. When we set poles here on the island, still some things like this can happen. And even then, you're going to experience effects of outages afterwards a storm, because while we go and do damage assessment, it is not to say that a jumper will not fail or a piece of equipment won't fail, and you may experience another outage.
Or lightning.
Or lightning, or, you know, days and days of rain that, you know, our guys are still working 16 hours to try to overcome. All that being said, that is what happened on the west end. We got all those new poles, they're nice, shiny, and everything else like that. It is not to say that those do not, if another hurricane was to come, it's not to say that something on that is going to fail. The whole purpose of those fiberglass poles is to make sure that they are sturdy and they don't break. They may lean, but the chances are the wire may fall. We still got to go back out there and pick it up. Now, it will lessen the amount of time that you're out, but it is not a foolproof system. There is no foolproof system when it comes to hurricanes.
Can you talk about, since Uri, the improvements that have come, and that not only is it the fiberglass poles, you're also using fiberglass arms and the stainless?
So the whole entire thing is now, for the most part, fiberglass. Earlier this year, we had detected, obviously, and I talked to many individuals who saw outages early on. We detected a lot of hot spots on the bolts that we were using. So we have now switched to stainless steel bolts. And that is a 8 times cost per bolt. Doesn't matter. It has to do with y'all's resiliency, reliability, everything. It's gonna burn up. We're gonna do our utmost to make sure that doesn't happen. So when we went back with the coated fiberglass arms, the fiberglass insulators, the ties, and now the bolts and everything are stainless steel. The whole idea behind that is to increase the longevity and to decrease the amount of pole fires that we may experience from drought situations or from anything along those lines. Now, when it comes to a specific freeze or something like that, that is where Mays was talking about those large generators we bought. The whole purpose behind those large generators is not just a freeze where we have poor generation coming from ERCOT, it's also for summers. We don't want everybody to go through a brownout. If you're living in your house and it's 115 degrees outside based on the heat and humidity, the worst thing that could happen would be a brownout or a blackout. So that was the purpose behind purchasing those large generators. Also, you have no idea if a substation transformer is going to fail. A substation transformer controls 3 to 5 circuits, just depends on what size it is, if it's 35, 12 kV. I can get a whole bunch of different things. We can talk for about 5-6 hours, but I gotta go pick up my groceries. So basically what I wanted to get to is—
Could you talk just a little bit on the switching and how you were able to get so many people back up after the Indian Beach thing?
Yes, so CenterPoint Energy has switching capabilities. So we have multiple circuits out there, just like your house or anything else like that, except we have a broader scale of it. So what we did in the terms of Indian Beach is we switched on as many customers as we could, and then we went to the specific location and we isolated it down with jumpers. That way, everybody else beyond those jumpers would be restored with power. The whole point in that is the resiliency factor. If y'all do receive an outage, we want to limit it to the location where it's actually damaged. We don't actually want everybody to experience the outage for a long period of time. Y'all would be screaming and killing me if y'all were all out for 24 hours and the damage was just 6 poles in the middle. So we always work to do that. We identify the switches, we go to those locations, we switch those so that you can be picked up by West Bay 2, West Bay 3, whichever one is actually hot at the time. And it can go also to be, hot back to the sub. That is all a part of our resiliency and reliability that we do on a day-to-day basis. Indian Beach just happened to be a freak accident, and we did our best to cut in those jumpers and everything else like that and work with those people, of which I walked to each and every single house the very next morning and talked to the individuals that were actually staying in those homes. Explained to them the situation. They were back on by 9:30 p.m. that night. Now that was a crazy endeavor, just as well as FM 3005. It's not very often. Usually it takes a big crew almost a half a day to set a primary pole. This was 8 to 12 primary poles that were affected, so you got to replace framing and also replace those poles. So we had 4 big crews down here that were basically, hey, get it done until it's done.
Can you also address like areas like, well, Dan left, but, Spanish Grand Bayside where you're actively adding more switching ability?
Yes, there was, I got with planning, I notified them, hey, you know, why is it that I'm seeing a consistent outage in this same vicinity whenever a switch is over here and a switch is over here, but the issue seems to be happening in between these switches, when I could simply relocate one to better serve and accommodate those customers versus the other. Those are things that, you know, we have to work those out. Engineering has their mindset on it. Reality is not always what you see on paper. So we have made that, you know, I basically said planning, we're doing this regardless if you want to or not. And they said, yes, that's fine. And they want to put an IG switch out there, which is an even more intelligent switch. So it can be operated from a radio signal way out in Tomball versus us having to actually go out there and switch it. So, but then again, if you talk about those switches, contamination comes into play and everything else. And once again, I can go down another hour-long tread. But there is a new outage tracker up. If you weren't made aware, it came up August 1st. It was already in the works before Beryl hit. It has now been expedited and it will continually be upgraded.
Can't wait to use it, right?
And I will say, like, Ryan is the greatest. I love him, I do. And it was so funny that one night, what was it, like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night? And his company sent out a message that no one was going to be up before July 19th. And he texted me, oh crap, did you get it? I'm like, yeah, 50 times already of people who forwarded it to me. And I think I was on the phone till 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's corrected with the outage map.
Yeah, so what happened in that instance is my team, we turn in the damage assessment. People that are in Greens Point, they will put a timeline that they feel as though that those repairs can be made. Because you're just basically doing an estimate of how long you think it's gonna take. In truth, Hurricane Ike, if you would have told me that same thing would have happened, I would have told you, all right, we'll see you in a month. I hate to tell you, but that was just the severity of it. That was the whole idea. These guys were able to get them back in the ground in 7 days. That's unheard of.
It's record-breaking.
Yeah, I can't commend them enough. Those guys worked tirelessly, and they went out there and just got it done.
And let me say, we went through a period of time where we didn't really have anybody in Galveston. Having Ryan here has been a godsend to the city because we can call Ryan, we can talk things through. He's on the ground here in Galveston. He actually knows what I'm talking about when I tell him a street name or a location. It really, really helps. We got spoiled by Keith Gray for many, many years. And I don't know if Ryan takes this the wrong way when I call him the new Keith Gray. But we are so happy that Centerpoint recognizes the need, one, to keep our service center open on the island, because there was even discussion that that was gonna go away for a while, and also to make sure that we have somebody at Ryan's level here that can actually work with us. And you know, he undersells himself. The issue at Holland House was an issue at Holland House. It was an issue on their property with their private electrical equipment. And Centerpoint, Ryan's pretty good about saying, you know what, the hell with it, we gotta get these people on. And he worked with us and worked with the housing authority, because you know how long it would have taken them to get the stuff they needed as a private firm to get that on? That's cooperation at a local level from Ryan. And I can tell you, 99% of the information that the city pushed out did not come from Houston, it came from Ryan. And I know everybody's frustrated, everybody was hot. I mean, I joked that my parents' house actually got like 2 degrees warmer than it normally is because they didn't have power for 2 weeks. But I'm telling you, we couldn't have done it without Ryan, and I can't thank him enough. And I will tell you, after having family that worked for ATL and Keith for 30 years, 7 days was amazing. And when he told me 2 weeks, I thought he was blowing smoke at that point, and he blew it out of the water, so that's right.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know how to ask a question. Okay, so we were very, very lucky. We got power back Tuesday. And then we hear the main power transmission line to the island failed or something, and that's why we all went down again. So I just wanna know that that's really well fixed.
Yes, yes. So, what ended up happening, so think about how underground, everybody's like, oh, go underground, go underground, go underground. Well, guess what? The main transmission line to Stewart Sub is underground. In fact, it goes under the water. So at Tiki Island, at the substation itself, there was an impact that happened there, and they had to choose between fixing that or fixing the substation. They chose to fix y'all's line and bring it back on hot so they could get the majority of people back on. Because Tiki Island also had other issues, so it was kind of a give and take type situation. And then they were to, you know, obviously get Tiki Sub back on, and that's when the line went down again. Well, we're not perfect.
No.
Yeah, we're not, you know, the line skills, most of them have been there for 20 plus years. They know what they're doing and everything, but you sometimes run into situations that you're just not expecting.
And as an operator of a public utility in water and sewer, I can tell you, I'm just as likely to have failure on a brand new line as I am on one of the old, actually, I got old lines that I'd hang my hat on all day long versus some of the new stuff, so new versus old doesn't necessarily matter.
There's actually a pole right outside the Galveston Service Center that was built in 1945, and that pole's still there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it's more concrete than it is pole now from petrification, but you just never know.
Yeah.
Right, on 3005, down in the area by Tipsy Turtle, beyond and before it, there's a lot of wooden power poles that have those metal splices that have been strapped around them. Do you see that as something short-term, long-term? Is a permanent fix? I mean, we're one storm away.
Yeah, it is short term. So there is also going to be a replacement of all of those large wooden poles for the transmission project. And within that project, they're also going to be changing out all distribution poles to fiberglass.
Well, you know what I'm talking about, they're wooden poles, but they have metal splices that are strapped around them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are intended to be replaced in the near future. Now, if they're a part of the 1,400 poles that the governor has demanded we replace by August 31st, I'm not 100% sure. I tried to delve down into that information and got lost. So, because there are 1,400 poles that are across the full service territory. So, but they are intended to be replaced, to answer your question. So.
Along those lines, you may wanna address the fact that those metal, splices that's been used, they're actually about 30 foot, and because these poles are set in sand, basically beach sand, by them being down in the sand a lot deeper than the 8 foot normally set on these poles, they're down like 20-something foot,
Yeah.
kinda like your pilings underneath your beach house. They also provide stability so that when the wind blows and the dirt washes away, the pole doesn't lean over.
Yeah.
And so they do provide stability. They're not just a temporary fix, they're help provide stability.
They're also transmission underbuilt, a lot of them. So the reason why they're also lower is because of the fact that transmission lines do not exist above them. No.
That's the pole's job.
We don't like lightning, nor do we like hurricanes. So, but all in an effort to say that we are working. We are not perfect. I mean, we're gonna grow every day, and we're gonna learn things, and we're gonna figure out things. So, I mean, one day there was steel arms were the way to go. The next thing, fiberglass arms that weren't insulated were the way to go. It's never going to be a perfect science around an island. We grab ideas from all sorts of other industries that also have to deal with a similar atmosphere that we do. Some of them are using DWG bolts, which we've used down here, and they don't perform so well down here as they perform in Mississippi, where they experience the same kind of salt water.
You didn't have a whole lot of serious injuries of your linemen during this either.
No, we did not.
And I'll tell you the difference. When my father-in-law was on the line crew for HL&P, they'd work in the lightning, and you'd hear their supervisor yell at them, "Ground the truck," and they were still up in the buckets. And they don't do that anymore. But I can tell you, my father-in-law had a list of friends that died on the job years ago. That doesn't happen anymore, and that's also credit to these guys.
Because y'all's safety and their safety it's paramount to everything we do. I'm not going to send those guys. In fact, if I had all of their numbers and the cell phones were actually working, I probably would have called all of them and told them, don't come over the causeway. My team, specifically, damage assessors, you know, they're not as important as the line crews, as the line skills, so I did call them and tell them, do not come here until at least 10 o'clock. Most of them showed up around 11 a.m. because I'm not gonna put them in the same factors that I just drove through. Also coincidentally, going back to the service center, it does flood by the service center. My car specifically can get into some of the situations, but not all of the situations. So we do have a way of getting people to park somewhere else and travel them to the service center, which we've had to do during, you know, the 8 days of rain. And we also have to work through that. Like, these trucks are able to transverse a lot of the flood waters because it is limited to the street, but they've got to work on poles that are right on the street. So if a pole breaks, it's right on the street, it's flooded, those guys got to put on their 3/4 boots and unfortunately take waterlog into them as they're working to restore power. So it's not a perfect system, it's construction. And that's what I like to relate it to people is that, you know, we work through everything. We work through rain, we work through all sorts of things to get the lights back on, and we will do what it takes to get the lights back on and keep them on consistently, but it's not a perfect system. There is no perfect system out there for it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, looking back now, as a postmortem, we greatly appreciate you and all of your boots on the ground to get us back up as quickly as you did. If this happens in the future, what do you need more of, and what do you need more quickly?
Fortunately, that's one of those questions I can answer. Because as Mays directly assessed, the CEO and him had good conversations.
He can tell you what he needs less of, he needs less wind, less rain, less.
I need less of all weather at all,
Well,
which
now, but
includes
you
sunny weather.
mentioned how long your crews have been on emergency operations.
Yes, this week is the first time those guys got to go home at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Since when?
Since the storm hit.
The tornado.
Yeah, so they had been working through derecho, obviously, that we got hit with in May, which, you know, I'm 37 years old. I've never heard that term until this year. I don't know many other people that have heard that term, which thank God I'm not a meteorologist because they also weren't doing a very good job. But our guys went on EOP. I went on EOP with them in late May. We didn't get off until about, you know, early June. And then these guys had to continue on 12-hour shifts, you know, working on resiliency projects and everything across the board, getting people back up to try to get to normal operations, which is, you know, we've still got, coincidentally, we still have people moving here. I don't know where, but they're coming. So we still got businesses to get back on. We've still got meters to set. We still got meters to change out, do temporary disconnects, reconnects for those that, you know, it's not perfect, but these guys have been working a lot.
The city crews just went back in normal operations. This is the first weekend we're not working 16-hour shifts. So.
But I will say that come August, now, starting next week, these guys will be going back into those double shifts to get what the governor has demanded to get done. These guys will be going back into double shifts and they will be working. Coincidentally, we also have 260 damage assessment teams that are going out during the weekend. So a few of them are actually on the West End right now doing a post-storm damage assessment to find anything else that we may have missed. You know, those outages that did occur, you know, sometimes it's a jumper on C-phase, sometimes it's a fuse that's improperly sized because these guys were getting the lights on. So they're back out there, they're doing damage assessment, they're going to, anything they turn in will also be done and is going to be grouped into that stuff that needs to be done in a timely fashion. So I can't speak to anything that May's talked about. I leave that to politics and people who are way above my pay grade. But as far as communication, one thing I will say is, you know, I had great communication with Brian. I had great communication with Marie. I got out as much information as I possibly could. No.
He usually calls me.
Text messages.
It's not uncommon for me to get a text from Ryan at like 6 in the morning. So, he is great on communicating. But we were running way over time, and we know how Jerry hates that. So I'm just gonna do a quick wrap up.
I was gonna mention one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Early on, you know, we had those HOA meetings and everything, and I jumped on everybody's HOA Facebook and stuff like that. I had to remove myself from that. I also had to, I was also told, would you like your phone number to be changed? My stuff got sent out to a bunch of people, all across Galveston County, and including into Houston. No fault of anybody's. I understand the vitriol, I understand all the other things. I'm not gonna come back to those people and be like, hey, you know, grow up or anything like that. That's not a part of who I am. But I'm also not going to have my personal Facebook come under attack or anything like that. So that's why I got out of a lot of those groups. I am still in WGIPOA, and I still will provide information to Marie and to Brian and the city and other people that ask for it. I will still provide that information. I just won't be doing it directly myself. It's not that I don't want to, it's just that it does come with a give and take, and I'm not a politician, so.
And along with that, many people call me and ask me for his number, and I will not give his number out. He has given it out, and I warned him when he did to be careful what he asks for. But you can always feel free to text me. I think if you don't have my number, 409-256-4518. But I will not give out number. I don't even give out Brian's personal stuff. Unless I'm really ticked at him, then I like even write it on bathroom walls. Kidding. But anyway, just to do a quick wrap up, I think one of the most important things this week is gonna be that TWIA meeting, and it's at 9 a.m. I believe we even moved our IGC meeting early because I requested it, because I will be there testifying in your defense as well as my own defense. Or we just paid our bill at $17,000. We have never had a windstorm claim. But I do suggest anyone who can make it there, please make it there. And you know, I look at these storms are horrible, and people forget the fact. I even forgot the fact at one point till I was looking for a bid on trees for our second home in Colorado. And I'm like, where the hell's that bid? And I saw I had emailed the landscaper and said, gotta give me a couple days, I'm dealing with a tropical storm. And that was Alberto. We got hit by Alberto, and 16 days later, I haven't really done the math, I made up the number, but it's somewhere close to that. We got hit by Beryl, and we hadn't finished recovering yet. They hadn't finished recovering yet. You know, we got the double whammy. When at one point earlier in the week, when I was looking at the different, you know, national weather, whatnot, looking at models that different weather guys do. And the American model had this storm now, Debbie, going straight into Galveston. I was like, dirty words. We just couldn't take. Yeah, it's like, this is a killer. But I also see the opportunity in every storm. And I'm already working those opportunities. It was with Winter Storm Uri when I went to Senator Taylor And to this day, and I'll say it in front of Ryan, he's heard me say this in meetings, no one from Centerpoint will ever be able to convince me that they didn't choose to leave our lights off on the West End because they said it's second homes, it is not a priority. And that has helped us get a lot of these improvements. So we can always use storms. And I had already, Brian wasn't available the other day, and I talked to Dan Buckley, or whatever title, you all have so many titles. But I talked to Dan Buckley, I'm like, we need to have Sally, our bulldog, working with the house utility meeting has a very general title. So how we can use this storm to help us get the natural gas ran to the rest of the island. Because Brian knows, he sits in the meetings, we have been talking to them now since Uri. And we're getting more of a positive response, but it's still very much an uphill battle. But I think this storm will help us with that. So I always look at the brighter side of things, and how we can use it, just like we getting fortification in our dunes, being able to do sand stocks. We know we have a nourishment coming in 25. There may be a beneficial use in 24. But towards the end, no, I guess they would all be in 25. We know we have that coming, but we have to do something to survive before that gets here. So I will call on y'all from time to time, because the more people who show up, the more effective it is. And we know that, especially when we were dealing with golf cart issues. And we got everybody to City Hall, and we were able to fix something that almost blew up in my face when I talked about the seawall and golf carts. Anyway, so I just wanna thank y'all for being part of the greatest district on the island. Did you wanna say anything quick, Sally? No. If you don't know, Sally is never quick, but she does she is our, what is your?
Director of Policy and Governmental Relations.
Yes, so she does our stuff in Austin and Washington. But she is also the governor's appointee on the Ike Day Committee. The
Gulf Coast Protection District.
Right.
You guys see me monthly.
Yeah, and she gives updates. And they did, thanks to Congressman Weber, have a major milestone, albeit it doesn't sound like it, but it is. He was able to get $500,000 of federal money that went to Tubman.
Well, actually, you've got two things happening, and I guess I will say something real quick. That $500,000 is in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers work plan, in their FY 2024 work plan. What Congressman Weber was able to get is $5 million in the FY 24 appropriations bill, and what they call community project funding requests. Years ago, we used to call them earmarks. That's still in play right now. Congress is in recess right now. They have to come back. It's gonna be really ugly, but we at least have that in play on the House side. And hopefully that will survive once they do take final action on the FY 25 appropriations. I'll have more to tell you when we have the meeting
What
in
you've
August
gotten
17th.
so far will help that $250 million from being clawed back by the state, right?
Well, we're also looking at how, GCPD is looking at, working with GLO on how we can provide the Corps what they call accelerated funding. In other words, now that we're in the work plan, now that we have this $5 million, all of that's gonna need to be matched, but we also have the money the state stepped up with, which is roughly 200 million, and how we can provide some accelerated funding to the Corps, which would allow the Corps to move forward on beaches and dunes, because that's at the top of our list, for elements of the Coastal Texas project and what we can do more quickly, obviously, than the larger gate system. So I hope to have the GCPD will be meeting second Wednesday of this month, so not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. And when I come back on the 17th, hopefully I'll have some more information for you.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. How about a nice round for Marie? Okay. Yeah, we got one little housekeeping Peggy reminded me of. Board, we need approval of the May 8th. And the June, blah, blah, okay. Our next meeting, is set for September 21.
Yep.
Right now, we have it at the West Isle Presbyterian Church, but I may check with the board if they'd like to come back here. We've had a nice turnout on this. So I think it's much better. So I'll check with the board. Outside of that, thank you, Marie, for what you did on this, and thank you, everybody. Thank you.